Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the February 12th, 2019 meeting of the regular City Titusville Council meeting at 6:30 p.m. We have a quorum. I'll call this meeting to order. Is Pastor Chris Garrison in the audience? That's Chris. Come on up to say our invocation. Good to see you, sir.
Thank you, Council. Let's pray. Our gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for the day. We thank you for the rain outside. Father, we thank you that it is not snow, as it in much of the northern Midwest and Northeast. Father, we think of those folks, 93 million people under the threat of winter storm warnings and watches today. And Father, we pray for crews and electrical crews and road workers, and we actually just pray for the health of people who need medical care and heat and food and water today in those areas, and grateful that that is not us today. But Father, our thoughts are here tonight because there is business to be conducted here in this place that concerns the city of Titusville and how we react to the things that are also going on in Brevard County, as well as the things that are going on in the state of Florida, as well as the rest of the country. And so, Father, we pray tonight for wisdom. Pray, Father, that choices that are made, decisions that are made, votes that are taken, Father, opinions that are expressed, and things that are done, Father, that these things would fall under the purview of your guidance and your will. Father, I pray that cool heads will prevail tonight, and that words that are spoken will be spoken with the desire to be at peace and to be useful and to be beneficial. And Father, we just ask that you would have your hand of protection on each member of this council that sits before us tonight. And Father, we ask that you would guide their thoughts and their words as well. Father, we ask that you would protect them from harm, and Father, them and their families as they serve our community. We thank you for the people who are sitting behind us. Some of them are emergency personnel, police officers, firefighters, and other areas. Father, we ask that you would protect them. We thank you for their work in the community. And Father, we thank you for each citizen who participates in these meetings, as is their right as an American and as a citizen. Father, we pray that you would use the things tonight, that your cause would be furthered. And I pray that you would be honored and glorified. And we pray that Jesus would be lifted up. And it's in his name that we pray. Amen.
Thank you,
Thank
Pastor.
You, Council.
Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Clerk, would you please read the procedures for public speaking? Is he here? Okay.
Individuals wishing to speak on public and non-public hearing agenda items must complete a sign-up card and present it to the clerk prior to the item being introduced. Those wishing to speak on quasi-judicial public hearings must complete a sign-up card and sign the oath. Sign-up and oath cards are available on the table in the council chamber. Individuals wishing to speak on non-agenda items may do so under petitions and requests from the public present. This opportunity is offered twice in the meeting, and individuals may speak at either the first or second petitions, but not both. No sign-up card is required. Citizens shall not comment on any issue more than once during the meeting. All comments except petitions and requests must address the pending issue, and citizens will be given 3 minutes to speak on all items.
Mayor, before we get going, I do have 2 agenda item adjustments for council.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Staff would like to table item 9A to 12 March 2019. And we'd also like to move Mr. Hickman's proclamation up to agenda item 5, please.
We need a motion on that, sir, or just consensus?
Motion, yes, sir.
I have a motion on that.
Move to move 9A to March 12th and move Mr. Hickman's the presentation with Mr. Hickman up to special recognitions and presentations.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mayor, if we could just announce what 9A is so the public understands what we're tabling.
Okay.
I just did it.
You should just say, want to do that?
I can do that. 9A is the Comprehensive Plan Amendment, CPA 1-2018, Brooks Landing.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed, like sign, passes unanimously, sir. Mr. Hickman, sir. Mr. Hickman, would you and your family care to come up here where we can address you? And if you'd come right up here, sir. If your family would like to join you, they may.
Hello.
Hello. Hi. If you'd like to sit down, sir, you're welcome to. I'm going to read the proclamation. If you would like to sit down, you're welcome to. It's kind of lengthy.
I'm fine.
You can do whichever you'd like. If the ladies would like to sit, they may. Good evening, sir. You have quite a background, and I'm going to read this proclamation, official proclamation, City of Titusville, Florida. Whereas in July 1965, Mr. Eisel Hickman relocated to Titusville, Florida, and whereas Mr. Hickman is a deacon at the United Christian Fellowship Church and a member of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP, whereas Mr. Hickman schedules and picks up the children for the free tutoring program at the United Christian Fellowship Church, and whereas Mr. Hickman has barbecue sales, donating the proceeds toward helping students pay for college visits and college tuition. Mr. Hickman feeds the homeless several times each year, as well as cooks and delivers food to our residents and their families during the time of bereavement and loss of a family member. And whereas Mr. Hickman mentors both Little League coaches and young men in the sport of bowling, whereas Mr. Hickman has volunteered countless hours in the construction and setup of the new church, and whereas Mr. Hickman coordinates a community food and clothing drive and donates the items to residents each year during the Christmas holidays, and whereas Mr. Hickman and his wife, Bertha, opened their home to 7 displaced children and provided their needs for over 10 months with no government assistance. And whereas Mr. Hickman operates a van for the Life Center Academy School and is known in the community as Grandpa Hickman. Now therefore, I, Walt Johnson, by the authority vested in me as mayor, do hereby proclaim our sincere appreciation to Eisel Hickman for his contributions to the city of Titusville. I extend my personal best wishes for your continued success in all future endeavors. Signed, Walt Johnson, Mayor. I'm going to come down and present this to you, sir.
And I might not stay through the meeting tonight. I've been under the weather all year.
Put you first, sir.
If I leave before it's over with.
Okay. Next item is approval of minutes.
Move to approve the minutes of the special city council meeting on January 29, 2019.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing any, all those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed, like sign, passes unanimously. Special recognitions and presentations, we have no others. Boards and commissions.
Yes, sir. The Planning and Zoning Commission, the terms of regular members John Chambers, Dwight Severs, Robin Taylor, and alternate member Suzanne Noble Copeland expire on January 31st, 2019. Regular members John Chambers, Dwight Severs, and Robin Taylor, and alternate member Suzanne Noble Copeland have expressed their willingness and desire to continue to serve in their current positions on this board for a 2-year term to expire on January 31st, 2021. There's one application on file for consideration, Mr. Joseph Richardson, who has expressed his willingness and desire to serve on the Planning and Zoning Commission as a regular member for a 2-year term to expire on January 31st, 2021. Mr. Richardson currently serves on the Municipal Code Enforcement Board as a regular member. He has been advised that if his appointment to the Planning and Zoning Commission, he would have to resign from the Municipal Code Enforcement Board immediately. In addition, there is one vacancy for an alternate member for a term to expire on January 31st, 2020. However, Mr. Richardson only wishes to be considered as a regular member.
Council, what's your pleasure?
I have spoken to Mr. Richardson, and he is willing to serve as an alternate. However, I pulled up the attendance record of the members, and Ms. Ritchie and Mr. Chambers have been missing a lot of meetings. Last year, out of 10 meetings, Ms. Taylor missed 4, and Mr. Chambers missed 3. This year, they both missed 2 out of 3 meetings. So I think we need somebody who is interested and willing to attend. So what I would propose is that Ms. Taylor become an alternate and that Mr. Richardson takes that place, takes that spot.
And the rest of the,
And the others stay where they are.
well, that would be Mr. Chambers and Mr. Severs, who are also up for...
Mr. Chambers and Mr. Severs. I understand Mr. Chambers has had some health issues, and however, I didn't hear that Ms. Taylor had any health issues, and missing 2 out of 3 meetings and missing that many last year concerns me.
So the upshot of it is Mr. Chambers, Mr. Severs, and Mr. Richardson will take the regular board seats, and Ms. Taylor will be nominated for the alternate. Is that correct?
Along with Ms. Noel Copeland.
As an alternate.
Correct.
Okay, I don't know if she's up, but, okay, do I have a second? I have,
Got some lights.
oops, sorry. Vice Mayor.
I agree with what you said, Member Nelson. I think that that's a good proposal, but I would like to hear, is there an explanation for the absences? I don't want to just jump into something and there was some reasonable explanation. And who do we go to get that, City Manager? So we won't be able to know if there was a, excused absence or out of town or death in the family kind of thing. That's difficult. But on the face of it, I agree with Member Nelson, 2 out of 3 to start the year. But gosh, I don't know why they missed. That's a concern.
Member Stokel?
Yep. Kind of along the same lines, I was just curious, I see a couple people that have applied in the audience, Mr. Severs and Mr. Richardson. Do we have any of the other applicants here tonight? Okay, and to me that means a lot too, when people want to show up, potentially answer questions. So I'm for that. My only question, I think we're only picking one alternate. Is that correct?
You would have 2 alternates, Noel Copeland, and I think Peggy's shaking her head, I'm right?
No.
You have a reappointment.
Okay.
Noel Copeland.
Yes.
Okay.
And
So
then
there's
we-
only one vacancy for the alternate position.
So,
You said
So
Robin
there
Taylor.
would not be a second one.
correct.
Okay.
So you nominated Robin Taylor.
So Robin Taylor would not be the alternate. Susan Copeland, Noel Copeland, has got a really good attendance record.
Okay.
I do have it here in front of me if you guys want to see it.
That's kind of, yes, what I
Yeah.
would kind of tend to go with then.
Yeah.
if we had to just pick one.
Yeah.
So I would
Okay.
second that motion then.
So we now have a motion and a second. Is any further discussion?
Yes.
Sir?
I have
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
My biggest concern is, what my concern was when we talked about it before, that Mr. Richardson application, the way it was handled, and what I remembered was that he said that he did not, the city told him that there was no opening when there actually wasn't an opening. But I still have a problem with that, just for the fact that we have 3 people who want to serve. They have been serving. That does concern me that they've missed some meetings, but we don't know why. And for us to prejudice them without knowing, I just couldn't vote for that. I personally, I know how hard it is to find people to be on these committees. And if the 3 have said, Dwight, Robin, and John have said that they are willing to continue, and Joe is already on the code of enforcement, no harm, they can continue to do what they're doing. I really would feel bad if these people were taken off, or one of them was taken off because, and we don't know the details of why they weren't coming to the meeting.
I misspoke. There is one reappointment for Noel Copeland, and there is a vacant position. Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. So,
Wait one second. Member Diesel, you're next.
And I spoke to the fact that I was concerned that I don't know why they were absent, but I would also say that they know that we're up, as they should, for a vote on this tonight. They should be here to answer why they weren't here. That being said, as much as I'm concerned that we don't know, they've missed 2 out of 3, and it would be good at the very least to get with city manager or somebody and have that in record to say, this is what happened. I just want you to know this before you vote. So that, that kind of almost alleviates that aspect.
What? No. Member Nelson? Member Nelson.
I have it, Robert.
Go ahead.
I did ask that question, and that's how I found out one gentleman had been ill. He had a number of absences, but if he's been ill and had some medical problems, it sort of felt like, okay. There was no indication that the other person had those kind of problems.
Just,
So-
you have something else to say?
Yeah, just, it has been my experience that when one is absent from a meeting, it's usually an excused absence and an unexcused absence. Do we know that? Got to have minutes or something that says if this was an excused absence versus unexcused, correct?
Well, the board doesn't excuse the absences. If they miss more than 3 consecutive or 50% within 6 months, they're automatically off, and it comes to you, and you can forgive those absences.
Okay.
But I'm not aware that the board has necessarily had a discussion about absences and whether they're approved or not approved, because ultimately that's up to you.
Okay. The only other thing, and I understand we're trying to be reasonable here, the only other thing that concerns me is the fact that we are saying that if they were very interested, they would be at this meeting tonight. We don't know why they're not at this meeting tonight. They may be in church. That's a good excuse. That's all I have to say. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Just for the record, would you go over who you're nominating for what, so we don't have any confusion in the future?
It might confuse me. I would move to reappoint John Chambers, Dwight Severs, and Joseph Richardson to the board as regular members. I would move to appoint Suzanne Noel Copeland and Robin Taylor as alternates.
All right. Okay. I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say yes? Yes. Any opposed, like sign?
No.
Passes with 1 dissenting. Member Jordan. Thank you. Next item, please.
Yes, sir. The Municipal Code Enforcement Board, regular member Sandra Oslin has submitted her resignation effective February 1st, 2019. Her term expires on October 31st, 2020. Jacob Edwards, open classification, and Norman Herman, engineer, currently serve as alternate members with terms to expire on October 31st, 2020. They have expressed their willingness and desire to serve on this board as regular member, and if not appointed as a regular member, they would like to continue to serve as an alternate member. There are currently no other applications on file for your consideration.
Just as part of your consideration, which we usually take into account, Mr. Herman has been on since 2017, and Mr. Edwards has been on since 2018. Do I hear a motion? Go right ahead.
Can I actually ask a question first?
Sure.
So at this point, Mr. Broom, Mr. Richardson would need to resign.
That is correct. He cannot serve on two boards. So by his appointment to this board, he will need to resign his position with the Code Enforcement Board.
So is that something that we need to re-advertise? Or we need to do something? What do we need to do? You have two positions.
Right, I'd make your appointment tonight, and then at the next meeting, we could fill the
The
code
second.
enforcement. Because there will not be another code meeting before your next meeting, so you now have an
Okay.
opportunity to fill that before then.
Okay,
So
that
you have
makes
two
sense.
positions and two applicants.
In that case, I would move to appoint Mr. Herman, this time. And then look at appointing perhaps Mr. Edwards next time.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Did
And-
we
and
accept the,
You're stopping in the middle of the motion. Do you really want to do that?
no, sir.
Okay. I have a motion and a second, and no further discussion. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed, like sign, passes unanimously. Now, did you have any comments you want to make?
I think we need to accept the resignation of Susan.
That's separate. That's separate. You can do that.
Okay. Then I'd move to accept the resignation of Susan Ozan,
Ozan, yeah.
I believe.
Yes. With appreciation, I said?
Yes, sir.
And if clerk will write out a letter to her to that effect. Okay. Do I have a motion and a second? Any further discussion? All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed, like sign, passes unanimously. Next item, sir.
Petitions and requests, sir.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes. Are there any petitions or requests from the public to speak on non-agenda items? Sir, your name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name is Stuart Buchanan, and I live at 5015 River Edge Drive. I would like to thank the mayor and city council and Coach Diesel for the opportunity to speak this evening. I would ask the mayor to confirm that this item is being televised.
It's right up there.
Thank you. I invited the local media, in particular Ken Tyndall with Channel 9 and Bobby Block, the senior editor with the Florida Today, to watch this portion of the meeting so they could do voiceovers afterwards. As many of you know, I've spent my entire life working for local government, both for cities and counties. Typically, I am either the city planner or on the county planning staff. I also write all the capital grants for public works, for roadways and utilities and stormwaters. I was born and raised in Titusville, and my family has been here for 3 generations. If any of you have had the chance to go to the Shamrock and Thistle across from our new Publix, that was my grandfather's first house, which he constructed in 1949. I'm here tonight to speak on behalf of my mother, who lives at 1745 Bahama Street, Susan Buchanan. 2 weeks ago, I had the opportunity to witness new meters being put in on the street, actually at my mother's house. I thought that it must be a contractor that had been hired by the city because of the workmanship involved. That is to say, it was not good. I watched them rapidly take out meters and put in meters with actually quite an amazing speed. It was very impressive. However, the workmanship suffered. The next day, my mother contacted City Hall, and spoke to your customer service because she said she could hear water moving in her lines. They told her that was not physically possible. She could not possibly hear water pass through her water lines. Today, I arrived at my mother's house, and there was one of your customer service inspectors hanging a door hanger on her door knob, telling her he had just shut her water off because she had a major leak and had used 3,000 gallons in the last 2 weeks. I spoke to him. He told me that my mother was the third one he's discovered so far in the neighborhood, all of which had new meters put in. I asked him what I was supposed to do with my 79-year-old mother. He immediately contacted a field crew who came out to look at the meter. I waited for the field crew. They inspected the line. They used the valve shutoff for the house, and they were absolutely positive that the break is in the line between the meter and my mother's house. They then told me that there had been a competition called Meter Madness on which crew could put in the most meters the fastest so that prizes could be awarded. I then asked to speak to their supervisor. I'm sorry. May I have more time to finish?
A minute too, sir?
Thank you. Yes, sir. Yes, Mayor.
Second.
Thank
The
you.
motion is second. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed, like sign. Go ahead, sir.
I then they contacted their field supervisor. I asked to speak to him. He refused to speak to me. He refused to give me his name. I then got in my car and I drove to the Utilities Administration and was instructed to come to the meeting tonight so I could speak to the Utilities Director just prior. I then went to City Hall. I put in a public records request for the amount of money that is budgeted for the Meter Madness prizes so that then they can be compared to the damage that was done to your residents' pipes and what it will cost to fix this problem. Tomorrow, I'm putting in a public records request for the other two houses in my neighborhood who also had have significant leaks so that they can be interviewed along with my mother by Channel 9 tomorrow. I met with your utilities director who assured me he's going to investigate this. I absolutely believe him. He seems like a very fine man. He's obviously a licensed engineer. I'm sure he's going to try to get to the bottom of it. There's one thing that he can't do, and that's what I'm here to ask you for. I would simply ask the mayor and city council to give clear direction to allow the utility department to expand funds to fix these three elderly couples' lines. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Frankly, before we do anything, we like to always check on all of the information, and I will ask council allows the city manager to review this situation and come back at a later date and tell us what details are involved.
Sure, you bet, sir.
Yeah.
Council consensus on that?
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. None of these households will have water, by the way, until, I guess, your next meeting. Thank you.
I'm sorry, sir?
The water's been turned off for all three of these households.
I'm sure we can arrange to get it turned back on for him,
Yeah.
sir.
Thank you.
City manager, you'll take care of that. Okay. All right, next item. Where are we on? Next person. Oh, next person, please.
Okay.
Yeah. Name and address for the record.
Stan Johnston, City of Titusville, 860 Poinsett Avenue. Thank you for deciding to serve the public. I'm also dedicated to serve the public as a professional engineer. I'm licensed to protect the health, safety, welfare, and private property of the public. Just a few minutes ago, I shared with you a problem, and it's identified reading the title of this affidavit that's in public records. It says, "Affidavit of gross negligence by some city officials and city council on refusal by the city of Titusville to have ditches and floodways inspected and maintained." And I previously discussed it with you. The question is what are all these big culverts on I-95 for? The answer should be, it's for water to flow. But of course, right now, they're very well blocked and they haven't been maintained for years. So I've approached the city many times, and there's other issues that concern me. I've been doing this for years, and I've been met with closed doors by the city manager and council members to discuss items. And that's why I'm here tonight, is because city manager won't meet with me, council members won't meet with me. So I have, you have in your packet today 2 pieces of paper that I've already emailed to you. One is a sketch C, Exhibit C. It's called Sketch of Illegal Flooding of Private Property by City's Adjustable Dam. And it also is included in it is an email that has it in the title. It says City's Illegal Flooding of Private Property and City's Shameful Denial of Genuine Open Discussion. And when I'm talking about the genuine open discussion, I'm talking city's closed door policy to me and to some others too. So in this regard, this is of concern is city's illegal flooding, and I want to read from you. I'm going to read from you part of this email. It says, "I'm prepared to serve as an expert witness," that's me, "to testify in court of many aspects of city's deception and dishonesty to conceal facts and to deceive the owner of the public of city's illegal flooding of private property. I'm also prepared to testify that city's consultant engineers have demonstrated by calculations that city's numerous proposed or constructed dams are designed to raise the flood zone elevation." We got calculations. And that the 1989 and 2014 firm maps should have never been approved by city's engineers and city council. Is that the end?
Apparently.
I ask for another minute to finish this?
You have 1 more minute, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Council,
I'll be real
do you
quick.
agree with that?
Okay.
Is there a motion? Second? All those in favor? Yes. 1 minute, sir.
Okay, real quick. They should have never been approved. I'm prepared to testify the city's approval of the 1989 2014 maps has resulted in injury and costs likely in the millions of dollars to the city and the public. I'm prepared to testify also about not some good things about the city, and sometimes good people do bad things. And I'm here to help you and answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
I see none, sir.
Okay, thank you.
I would be remiss if I didn't tell you the rest of the story. Mr. Johnston has for years, well, Mr. Johnston was on city staff at one time. For years, he has been asking questions of city councils, mayors, all kinds of stuff. This is one book I have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, going from 2012 to 2019. These were all questions and that were answered by our staff. At a certain point, we even brought in an outside agency to check on the accusations that were being made. And how much did we spend on that?
$70,000.
It's about $70,000 to disprove everything he was saying. I mean, they did disprove it. We didn't set it up. That's not what I meant. It was an independent engineering organization, and they could find nothing of what he said that was the case. So we have stopped responding, which we have a right to do. I don't have to respond. I do respond generally. But when it gets to the point of absurdity, I don't want to waste my time. It's better spent serving the people that are in the community. So that's the rest of the story. Next item. Next person, please.
Good evening. My name is Jacqueline Reason, and I'm with Grow Nonprofit Services Corporation. And I'm here because I need to make a clarification from last week's presentation about public service funding requests. Mayor Johnson, you asked me a question towards the end of my presentation last week. You asked if all of the organizations out there is on board with my plan, and yes, I answered yes. Mm-hmm. And you also asked if I had signed agreements from each of the organizations, and my answer was yes. What I need to clarify is that out there, I'm going to assume is at the Gibson Center. But what my answer was specifically for is for the individuals that was on the visual that I provided to you. Those are the people within my network. Those are the people that we have agreements with, and those are the people that are on board.
Okay,
And that's all. I just wanted to clarify that.
I appreciate that, ma'am. And frankly, I would like to see the agreements to see what their agreements are.
I
with
did.
you.
I emailed them to
Okay,
city staff.
I may not have seen that particular email, so I will go back and check.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Next, please. Any other, next card?
On petition still, sir.
Okay. Next item.
Yes, sir. Consent agenda items. Council, do you want to pull any of the items A through H? Correction, A through I. We do have a card on item G.
Okay.
Hearing none, I'll read for the record.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Consent agenda item 8A, approve resolution number 4, 2019, and authorize the mayor to execute the annual update to the water resources technical specifications and provide for an effective date. Consent agenda item 8B, approve the award of the contract subject to resolution of the contract terms by the city manager and city attorney to EA Tapping Services LLC of Apopka, Florida, in the amount of $34,000 for the purchase and installation of 2 8-inch insertion valves, 1 12-inch insertion valve, and 1 14-inch line stop for in-line control valves on the sewer force main that runs along Indian River Lagoon, and approve the budget amendment authorizing the city manager to execute the contract. Consent agenda item 8C, transfer flag and memorial committee funds totaling $6,800 from a restricted account into a non-restricted account in order to make the following purchases. Banner flags for Avenue flags, $2,000. Plaques, names, tags, bricks for Veterans Park, $1,000. Event expenses, including flyers, program, and advertising, etc., $1,000. Fundraising costs, $1,000. Donations to nonprofit organizations, $1,000. And miscellaneous supplies such as stamps, paper, toner, envelopes for $800. Consent agenda item 8D. Adopt the historic preservation plan completed by Environmental Services Incorporated. Consent agenda item 8E. Adopt resolution 3-2019 supporting temporary closure of state roads for Rotary Chili Cook-Off, 5K Run, and the Mardi Gras Downtown Street Party. Consent agenda item 8F. Approve the award of the agreement for professional building department services with Joe Payne Incorporated, piggybacking the contract with Brevard County Board of County Commissioners, expiring on September 30th, 2021, with an additional 1-year renewal, and authorize the city manager to execute the agreement. Consent agenda item 8H. Approve the award of work order ECTSW009 to Environmental Consulting Technologies Incorporated to manufacture and install stations that will monitor rainfall water levels at 5 areas in the city in the amount of $32,625, and authorize the city manager to execute the work order. Consent agenda item 8I. Approve the purchase and installation of ACE 2000 automated closed captioning engine with SCE 492 closed captioning encoder in the amount of $44,920 from Encore Broadcasting Solutions of Ultimate Springs as funded in the FY 2019 budget, and authorize the city manager to put all instruments in place to make this purchase. And the item that was pulled is consent agenda item 8G, approve advisability as requested by the Planning and Zoning Commission to review ordinance number 50, 2018, creating height overlays. And you do have a resolution in here, so require a roll call after you hear the card on it, on G.
Okay. Who pulled the card on G? I'm sorry?
We have 2 cards,
G?
Rodney Honeycutt and then Stuart Bohannon.
Good evening. Rodney Honeycutt, 3700 South Washington Avenue. I put a card on the item because I really wasn't aware of it, and I just happened to see it on the agenda. I have a client that's Kennedy Point. As you know, that would be one of the possible hotels in the overlay district and up to 150 feet. And so we'd be concerned if there was anything that would reevaluate that. And it came from planning and zoning, and I think they had moved to deny it. So we were just concerned. I'm not opposed to it, but I would, if it went forward, I would like that it didn't address the overlay area that Kennedy Point is in, or it didn't address the height that was previously passed, as my client has spent a good bit of money since then.
All right.
Thank you.
Any questions?
I was
Yes,
just,
go right ahead.
and city manager could probably address this easier, but my understanding is it's on the agenda to clean up the language in there, not necessarily to change it.
Okay.
There were 5 items that P&Z requested that we take a look at, and that's in your packet.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to, for the record, make sure.
Yes, sir, thank you.
Thank you. My name is Stuart Buchanan. My address is 5015 River Edge Drive. Similar to Mr. Honeycutt, obviously he's a professional engineer with a long history here in the city of Titusville and North Brevard. I would hope that the only changes were made were the cleanup, and that there were no further restrictions or substantive changes to the item. I would simply like to say that to get the higher end quality hotels, as you all know, as I mentioned previously, I've been in the rezoning and land development review business for a few decades now. They will not build if they cannot build to a certain height, and you end up with what's a lower grade of flag. It's that simple. If you want good hotels, you have to let them go to a certain height. You put them in certain locations, like along I-95. The only thing it does is positive for the community. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So at this point, the cards have been read. Any further discussion
Oh, I
on
guess
that?
you have to press the button. Nope, I just wanted to make the motion.
If you'd like to make a motion, go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move for approval of consent agenda items A through I.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Not hearing any. All those in favor say yes.
You'll roll call, sir.
Oh, roll call. I always miss that. Roll call, please.
Member Jordan?
Yes.
Member Nelson?
Yes.
Mayor Johnson?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Diesel?
Yes.
Member Stokel?
Passes unanimously. Next item.
Yes, sir. This is item 9B, CPA number 4-2018. The Planning and Zoning Commission considered this request at their February 6, 2019 meeting and recommended denial 7-0. The applicant, on behalf of the owner, is requesting a comprehensive plan amendment to change the city's future land use map and rezoning of approximately 13.13 acres of vacant property on the west side of US 1 north of Silver Star Road. The purpose of this amendment is to allow for the development of a 3-story apartment complex. The proposed height is 35 feet, which is consistent with that of multifamily high-density R3 residential zoning district. The property is within the city's area of critical concern, which is governed by Chapter 28 Special Districts and Overlays, Article 5, Area of Critical Concern Overlay District AAC, and Chapter 30 Development Standards, Article 3, Improvements Division 6, Stormwater Management and Aquifer Protection. The site is not within a specified well radius, but will have to abide with the maximum 40% of impervious coverage for the entire property. Based on the property area of 13.13 acres, the maximum amount of impervious coverage on the property will be 5.25 acres. On January 29, 2019, the applicant held a meeting with the public to discuss the land amendment. The applicant may discuss the results during this meeting, and the staff recommendation is to conduct a transmittal hearing for CPA 4-2018 to amend the future land use map from commercial low density to high density residential and rezone from hospital medical HM zoning to multifamily high density residential R3 zoning.
I just wanted to clarify, it was a vote of 6-0. One of the P&Z members did abstain. So it was a vote of 6-0 with one member abstaining in the vote.
Okay.
And staff is available to answer any questions that you may have prior to the applicant and discussion.
Council, any questions?
If I could, I have a report.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. This is a land use transmittal. You will probably hear a lot of information about zoning, but I want to clarify what the point of the meeting is this evening. In order to do any land use amendment over 10 acres, we have to go through the process of a transmittal hearing, goes to the state for their review and comment. It would come back. Then there would be the opportunity for council to look at the future land use and the zoning. This evening, it's important to remember that the future land use is low intensity commercial. When you hear HM or hospital medical, what that will refer to is the zoning, which is not the issue this evening. And just to let you know, in low-intensity commercial, there are a number of zonings that are permitted. They can include open space recreation, public, hospital medical, tourist, neighborhood commercial, community commercial, office professional, and planned development. Now, should this go to transmittal and come back, then the next step will be, does council wish to A, adopt the future land use amendment, and then B, do they choose to adopt the requested zoning? The meeting, I just want to provide a little bit of background. We do have this overhead, which is already shown in your documents, but sometimes it makes it easier if people can see everything that we're talking about. That is, my children are laughing at me even as we speak. They love to make fun of their mother. Okay, here we go. The property you can see is located to the west side of US 1, just north of Silver Star Road. It's approximately 13.3 acres, and it is located adjacent to, you can see the single family that is to the west, south, and north of the property. There is a square there that is not in the red, that is undeveloped. That is also currently zoned R3, and the land use is, I'll show you here this in a minute. And the land use is the same land use that's being requested this evening, which is the high-density residential. So the map on the left shows you that it's residential in nature all around it. There is one green square in there, which shows you a tiny piece of industrial. And then to the south of that, there is also some industrial. The next thing is the existing and proposed zoning, which is the next process, so I'm not going to go over that this evening. And I'm going to leave up this map since we'll be talking about the land use, or at least it'll be available. I'm sure that if you want to see it, it'll be available to you. I'd also like to tell you that the maximum allowable density under this land use is 15 units per acre, which has the potential to yield 196 units. There is a limitation on this property because it's within the area of critical concern, which does limit the amount of impervious surface that can be put on the property. So whether or not 196 units are possible, perhaps the engineer of record will be able to discuss that in more detail, but that is just a multiplication of 15 times 13. The requested high-density residential land use can be considered a transitional land use between the US 1 corridor and the single-family property to the west. The proposed residential use could be considered as well-suited because of its position near the trail, which would allow, which could be better in that instance than commercial, because in order to have access across US 1, there would have to be access across the trail. So whatever use is decided there tonight or later will have the trail running adjacent to it. During the history of this is that during the citywide rezoning in 1993, the subject property was designated with multifamily, high-density zoning, and it was residential land use. It was subsequently changed to commercial low-intensity, and as it stands today, and the request at that time, when there was the comprehensive plan amendment and rezoning, contained two conditions. The first related to street widths and drainage requirements, as well as the technical issues related to how wide the sidewalk is and curbs and gutters. The second is an interest to the people that are here this evening, and that is that traffic access to the site from Georgia Avenue was prohibited. And Georgia Avenue is a stub out that enters the property on the west side and comes through the residential neighborhood. And those conditions at the time were created due to the concerns of commercial traffic utilizing Georgia Avenue. The comprehensive plan amendment, future land use element, requires that there be an analysis related to urban sprawl. Based on the criteria that is contained in your report on page 4 and 5, the staff did not find that this would have any impact or encourage in the effect of urban sprawl, because it is already in proximity to a mix of residential, commercial, and industrial uses. Based on the recent growth of employment opportunities within the city and the standard growth rate of approximately 1.5% each year, the proposed amendment's in line with the typical growth pattern for the city. Water Resources has found that there is adequate water, sewer, and reclaimed services available. The proposed amendment does offer an opportunity to transition more intense uses to the east, which is single family, and south of the subject property to the north and west of the subject property. The development pattern in this area includes a mix of single-family residential, commercial, and industrial uses. While the request does introduce multifamily adjacent to single-family, the multifamily land use is viewed as a transition from more intense uses to the south and the east to the less intense uses to the north and the west. There have been no level of service issues identified as they relate to this property, and the comprehensive plan has a number of policies about the location of this site, of this property, as far as multifamily. Policy 1.1.2 of the traffic element states the city shall require transportation connectivity between land uses and development sites in the land development regulations. The property is adjacent to 3 roadways, US 1, Silver Star Road, and Georgia Avenue. Development of this property under the high-density residential land use does provide an opportunity to provide pedestrian and vehicular connections where none currently exist. The staff does recommend transmittal of the comprehensive plan amendment, which would allow additional input from the state before it could be considered further. If there is one other item, and that is that during the planning and zoning meeting, there was a handout provided that was called Special Conditions for Approval of CPA 4 2018. These include building setbacks in addition to some height restrictions and some additional landscaping buffer, installation of a PVC fence, and that vehicular access connection to Georgia Street, Tennessee Street, and Maryland will be prohibited. These conditions cannot really be assigned to a land use. These conditions are more appropriately discussed in the event that the property request goes forward to the zoning. So I just wanted to make you aware of those items. If there's any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Council, any questions? I don't see any.
Thank you.
But I would like you to repeat that about the connections to Georgia Street and.
This can be explained, I'm sure, more by the applicant, but the conditions as they were provided to the planning and zoning said that vehicle access connection to Georgia Street, Tennessee Street, and Maryland will be prohibited.
Thank you, ma'am. I see no questions, clerk. I'm sorry.
Go right ahead.
I just wanted to clarify the history of this piece of property. You said in 1993 it was residential land
Yes,
use?
that's correct.
And then when did it switch over to low intensity?
Well,
or was it
to low-intensity commercial? It happened, that also happened in 1993.
Okay, so do we know what was going on prior to 93?
Yes, it was, I believe it was not annexed into the city.
Okay, so from 93 on, it was residential and then low-intensity commercial. And then to here we are today.
But also 1993 was that magic date where the comprehensive plan had been adopted and there was a wholesale administrative rezoning all over the city. So there's a lot of the zoning that dates back to 1993.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Anyone else? Not hearing anybody. How many cars do we have, clerk?
Probably about 15 or so.
Okay. Because that's a pretty good number of cards, I would just ask you that when you get up to speak, please try not to repeat something that's been said several times before, just in the interest of everybody's time. Everybody will have 3 minutes unless they are representing a group. If that group doesn't want to speak and they want to designate somebody, we can take it on a case-to-case basis as you come up there if you'll let us know that. Please call the first card.
Walt Soretti.
So right up.
Hello, Mr. Mayor,
Sir.
council members. I just want to put a local face with this and give you guys a little history, which was done very well by staff. Thank you. The property was originally zoned R3, and we looked at it and said, you know, there's a new hospital coming. And it seemed like that the HM would be a more appropriate use. Maybe expand the campus to the west, maybe some ancillary private use. So that's what we did. Well, 25 years later, in 5 different site plans, it didn't work out. The hospital decided to expand to the east. They now have 60 acres, only about half of which is built upon. They have a healthcare village, which to my knowledge isn't even being used. They just built a $1 million infrastructure to build doctor's offices. That's also on hold. Point being, we've got all the HM we need. The hospital also just built a 60,000 square foot building at Titus Landing, only a third of which is being used, another 40,000 square feet available. Within a mile of the hospital, there's 28 acres, not counting ours, of HM zoning property. So we're not going to run out. There's also, in that same area, 12,500 square feet of doctor's offices vacant. So we need some new direction. We know, and the Forbes magazine reported Titus was in the top 15 growing areas of the country in 2017. We know that Eastern Florida State College is a fully accredited college and has 120 acres, so a lot of room to grow. We know about Parrish being the second largest employer in North Brevard. We know the Palm Point Behavioral Health Facility just opened, 100 new jobs coming. We know about SpaceX. We know about Blue Origin's $200 million building, hopefully a lot of new jobs. We know about the coast-to-coast trails, which have been mentioned. Here's what I didn't know. There's no Class A rental space north of Titus Village, or Titus Landing, excuse me, in Titusville at all. So, you know, Solomere Grand, which is the closest thing I think that's comparable, which is brand new as we know. I happen to live in the subdivision near there, and it's been fantastic, been very successful. And that's what I think we can expect here. In closing, I'd like to say I believe the best use for this property is amending it back to residential so as to allow this quality project to move forward. Any questions?
Any questions from council? I see none, sir. Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Rodney Honeycutt.
By the way, just so I can make a clarification, these are the applicants, so they aren't limited to 3 minutes. They get to make their presentation.
Good evening again. Rodney Honeycutt, 3700 South Washington Avenue, Titusville, Florida. So tonight we're requesting you to forward the land use comp plan amendment to the state for review. As it's previously said, the site is zoned hospital medical and it's commercial low intensity. Uses that are allowed on the site now, there's several, I'll just mention a few. Assisted living facility, pain management, cash-only pharmacies, and medical marijuana dispensing facilities. These things are allowed on the site now. The maximum height that is allowed now, actually by zoning, there is no height limit, but since it's commercial low intensity, 50 feet height limit. And the setback from Grove Park subdivision, which the residents are from, is 10 feet. Now, if you want to go 50 feet high, you have to add another 7.5 feet, making it 17.5 feet. Well, in actuality, the city's landscape buffer is 20 feet, so it would be 20 feet. So a building 50 feet high could be 20 feet right now, just like it's zoned, just like commercial intensity land use. So I just wanted to point that out. What we're requesting tonight in the land use is a high-density residential. It will allow, I think, 198 units, but that don't really matter. It'll be close to that. If you say 13.2 acres times 15, I think it's 198. The main thing about that is that's around 200 units, and that's the sweet spot for an apartment complex. Solomir Grand has about that, a little more. We have a client on the south end of town, and they're telling me the same thing, that that's a sweet spot. You need that many units to make it work. There is a demand right now. I'm being told by the developer for this site, the developer for the apartment units on the south end of town, and also I think you all know that Solomir Grand filled up immediately as soon as they could get the buildings. That's what happens when you have economic development in your site, on your area, and particularly like in the industrial park and also on the private side at the Cape. And so these things are long-lasting jobs. They're not as subject to government shutdown as NASA has had in the past. So these are long-lasting jobs. The area south of this site is already zoned R3, commercial high-intensity land use. If you look at the map, along the length of the adjacent subdivision to the west, there are 14 homes. 6 of them back up to the existing R3 commercial high-intensity zone, and the rest of them about back up to this site. So almost half of them already back up to a similar site. We met with the local area residents. Actually, we met with them twice. This is not a zoning matter tonight. However, in that meeting, we listened to their concerns, and that's how we came up to the conditions that we're willing to go beyond what's required in the code. And I'm going to review those with you in a little more detail than staff did. First of all, we said that the closest building to the Grove Park subdivision would be 100 feet. That's 10 times the setback, or 5 times the real setback because of the landscape code is what really is setback with 20 feet. And then also the site to the south in that corner that's already zoned R3, he asked that the building be set back a little further too, so we agreed to 60 feet instead of 20 feet. We've agreed that the buildings that back up to this area will be a maximum of 2 stories. 2 stories would be probably 24, 25 feet, as opposed to 50 feet if someone just wanted to go in now and build. The developer agreed to a 6-foot opaque fence on the north border. The north border don't back up to any of the residents. However, they were concerned that people would leave the apartment complex and go along a area that's used for maintenance of the stormwater pond to the north and go into their subdivision. And so we agreed to a 6-foot high solid fence there and a 6-foot high solid fence along the west boundary and around this already zoned R3 property. And so that means that the access to Georgia Avenue or any of those other streets will be blocked by a fence. We also agree to not access any of those streets. We've also, instead of a 20-foot buffer, green buffer, there will be almost a 50-foot green buffer backing up to the Grove Park subdivision. At least 20 feet of that will be the landscape code as required by the city's landscape code. And then there'll be almost another 30 feet that will have some landscaping in it, and there will be some drainage in it as we have to drain north. And so those are all the things that we agree to, and we're putting it on record. I agree with staff. You don't really attach conditions to a land use amendment at this time, but they're on the record, so when it comes back, they will be part of the rezoning. So I wanted to make sure you knew that. This will be a great apartment complex. The developer's here, and he's going to talk about it a little bit. It's across the street from the hospital. It's almost straight across the street from the community college. There'll be jobs there. There's jobs up to the north in the new assisted living facility. There's a trail that runs across for the residents. Across the street and just to the north is a park. It's a beautiful apartment setting. And so we're requesting tonight that you forward the land use amendment to the state. And I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions? Right ahead.
I'm not sure, Mr. Honeycutt, if I should ask you, I should ask Ms. Busaka. What were the reasons for planning and zoning recommending denial?
I can read to you from the minutes.
Okay.
The discussion related to Chairman Williams said that this was denied because the current zoning and future land use on the property is correct. The Planning and Zoning Commission members agreed.
Correct. So no other words of wisdom?
Well, it says here that Member Noel Copeland had concerns with properties being allowed to be cleared. Then the development did not take place and the land was left cleared and unused. That had happened apparently in property adjacent to that. But that doesn't really have anything to do with the land use. That's the land development regulations. Let me see. There was some discussion about tabling it for additional time for review. And Member Sievers said he had comments regarding things he felt had been left out of the staff report. He provided a handout to each of the Planning and Zoning Commission members and staff with details regarding his comments and went over the handout. At that time, Member Noel Copeland made the motion to not amend the future land use map, and the Vice Chairman, Mr. Shavir, seconded. And then the motion was approved 6-0. And then it was clarified by Mr. Williams that it was denied because the current zoning and future land use on the property is correct.
Okay, and we have no idea what Mr. Sievers.
I don't have a copy of that, I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Mayor.
Rodney, you've met with the homeowners in the neighborhood twice?
Yes.
And I know we're going to hear from many of them, but before I do, or we do, I'd like to hear what you heard. What were the biggest concerns that they expressed? Because clearly there's some concerns.
Well, we addressed what I thought were all the viable concerns and the conditions we agreed. Their biggest issue is they don't want anything to go on this property.
Okay, and you've taken care of the traffic issues, Georgia,
The
et cetera?
traffic issues will be during the site plan, and a traffic study will be required.
Okay.
Anyone else?
I got one question.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I appreciate, you explained a lot about any of the challenges that we may have, and of course, we've got a lot of the members in the neighborhood still here, so apparently there are still some concerns. As a business owner, I think you're going way out there for sure to make sure that your neighbors, new neighbors, are pretty happy. But my question is, the 100-foot buffer that you're talking about, if you didn't do that buffer, I guess you call it a buffer, you're not going to build a home closer than 100 feet on the west side, correct?
That's correct. No, it was a setback. We agreed to a setback. From the side that backs up to the neighbors, there's no building closer than 100 feet and no closer than 60 here, and it could be 10 feet by code. So
And if it was 10 feet, could you put more apartments in there?
We can, we don't need 3-story everywhere to get the 190-some units. And so there'll be 3-story all along the front, but those in the back will all be 2, and we'll be able to do it. I think the developer will tell you in a minute, there'll probably be a lot of 1-bedrooms.
Okay. But you're saying since 200 is the sweet spot and you're doing 198, you think, so
Right.
you've got enough space to do exactly what you need to do. But there was no vision from the developer to do more than 200?
No, we knew that.
They hadn't, okay.
Yeah, no.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor?
What will and I'm not sure you know, but what will the rent be average in this complex?
The developer can tell you that.
Okay.
No, I don't.
I'll wait.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I guess the only other thing I would say, this is the letter of transmittal. So we may be very preliminary with some of these questions, and honestly, you got to do this in order to go to the next step. So
Correct.
To me, we can talk about it all we want. A process is a process, and the first part of the process is the letter of transmittal. There's a lot more time for us to decide whether we want to accept the transmittal and rezone this thing.
Correct.
So
When it comes back.
so talking about it tonight is not really going to do anything except
Transmit to the state.
that's all we're going to do. Okay, I just want to make sure that's clear to everyone, that it's nothing actually, we're just talking about a letter of transmittal. And there's going to be a big opportunity to come back and say, I don't like, what they said, if they accepted it, and I don't want you to rezone this thing. You do have opportunity to do that later on. Okay, thank you.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Name and address for the record, please.
Sure. For the record, Scott Banta. I'm the developer and a contract vendee for the property, 97 Hickory Tree Road, Longwood, Florida. We're excited to be here with the city. We've had several meetings with staff dating back to last fall relative to the property, and we believe that there's a serious need for Class A type apartments in the city of Titusville. And you're going to hear some impassioned pleas by the neighbors, but we specifically only negatively, if you will, by taking away their trees, impact 8 houses. So, and then what we've tried to do is we've tried to address the concerns of the neighborhood by prohibiting the vehicular access through, by putting a fence around the north side, the west side, the south side, and along the west side down to the industrial area there. We'll probably have some nice fencing and landscaping along the trail also, but that wasn't a consideration for the neighbors. We agreed to the 2-story buildings, and I have a picture here. That's approximately what the units will look like. So this is going to be very nice. It almost looks like a big house. We have a copy for each of you. I don't know if you want to hold that up. With the neighbors' concerns, we have, you're going to hear about endangered species such as the gopher tortoise. As you know, the city has requirements regarding that. The state has requirements. Same thing with retention. You're going to hear potentially a lot about existing neighborhood conditions in the neighborhood that are caused by potentially a bad weir on the pond that's, I believe, either city or county owned, that's off-site. We have agreed also with the homeowners that when Rodney does the engineering, that we'll see if we can figure out how to help that situation and rectify at least some of that if possible. We have the hospital across the street. We have the State College across the street. For the State College to expand, they're going to need housing at some point. We have met with the developers of the South Complex that you're all taking a look at that project that Rodney's doing also. That's Condev. So we met with them, and we all believe that there's room for both projects without any problem, and probably several more. One of my best friends and closest personal friends works for a company doing market studies for apartments. He has probably done about 60 or 70% of the new apartment complexes in Orlando. He's done all the transit ones, and he's been over and looked at the site, and he concurs. You'll see some pictures tonight of Mayfair Way apartments, which are nowhere anywhere near what we're proposing to do here. The ultimate value of these are going to be in the neighborhood of $200,000 a unit. The rents, Commissioner Diesel, they'll probably start in the $130 to plus range, $1.30 a square foot range. The average size of these units will probably be in the $950, $975 range. Sotomayor is huge units. Their smallest unit is a one-bedroom at 1,176. They go up to 1,476. Our biggest three-bedroom, and we'll only have probably 8-ish%, less than 10% of the units will be three-bedroom. This is going to be geared to professional people. The incomes will be very high. We had a very similar situation in Castleberry, where what ended up happening was the rents were higher than the majority of the mortgage payments. The unit costs were higher from a tax base, et cetera, than the majority of the housing there. And the income requirements necessary for someone to live in these units is higher than most of the income in the area. So that's all I have for right now. I'd be happy to answer any questions, and I'd like the opportunity to come back at the end.
Any questions?
Where is this located?
That one's in Estero Beach. There's also some similar units to that in Kissimmee.
Okay.
But we're modeling it after that because we really like the look and the feel, and we think that that's appropriate for Titusville at this point.
Is that wood or cement board?
That's it's a concrete board.
Concrete, okay.
Any other questions?
Now, some of them will be three-story. We agreed to the two-story on the westerly side in order to achieve the density. We cannot go higher than the 198 units. So, I mean, that's a cutoff. That's based on the 15 units per acre times the number of acres.
Member Nelson?
And you started to say how big a three-bedroom would be in terms of square feet?
The three bedrooms are probably in the neighborhood of somewhere between 1,275 and 1,350.
Okay, thank you.
But it'll be less than 10% of the units.
Any other questions? And you will be allowed. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
And again, this may not be ready yet, but what sort of lease lengths will you have?
What will ultimately happen here is we'll have professional management on site, and the majority of the lease terms will be 12 months. We would also anticipate some corporate rentals. I have a son who travels a lot, works for a demolition company, and he's in a spot for 8, 10, 12, 14 months, and he's been living in hotels for he has 857 nights, Marriott nights built up. So the company finally just went ahead and got him a regular apartment. But they're paying $2,500 for a one-bedroom, and that includes the cable and the electric and all the maintenance. So.
Any other questions? Member Jordan, you have your light on?
No, I'm sorry.
Thank you. You will be, as applicants, you will be asked again to come back up if you have any rebuttals.
Great, thank you so much.
I'm going to open the public hearing. Clerk, will you call the cards, please?
Stuart Buchanan.
Good evening. Again, my name is Stuart Buchanan. My address is 5015 River Edge Drive. I'm speaking in support of this project. I actually wasn't here tonight for this project at all, but then I saw it on the agenda. This is a transmittal hearing. This is very near and dear to my heart. As I mentioned before, I was responsible for all large-scale transmittals for all of Brevard County. I was also responsible for reviewing all the ones prepared by the municipalities that had a joint planning agreement. I got sent a copy of them. I had to review them all for the entire county. It is going to be sent to 5 state agencies. You're sending it to 5 state agencies for comment. St. John's, DEP, Department of Transportation, East Central Florida Regional Planning Council. I would encourage you to transmit it, get it back, and see what their comments are. And that would give you much more information on which to base a decision. Very quickly, if you want to talk about trip generation, 13 acres of commercial has a much higher trip generation than the 198 units. To put this into perspective for you, a typical public shopping plaza is about 9 acres. This is 13. Those 13 acres of commercial would throw off more trips than 198 apartments would any day. Any of the engineers present can provide that analysis for you later on when you get into site planning. You're directly across the street from the hospital. We know who these units are going to get rented to. They're going to get rented to hospital staff who can walk across the street to work. It's a fantastic idea. The reason you heard someone say 200 units is the sweet spot, I can tell you from working for various multifamily developers, it all has to do with on-site management. If you drop below 175 units, roughly, you do not get on-site management. You don't want little 50-unit apartment complexes where there's no on-site management. If you get 198 units, on-site management, lawn care, landscaping company, pool, clubhouse, weight room, gym. Finally, one of the things that you'll often hear residents complain, this happened in my mother's neighborhood, is that people will rent single-family houses in subdivisions, and then the renters don't take care of the lawns, they don't take care of the houses. That's because there's not new apartments available. Mayor and City Council, I'd encourage you to transmit, receive the comments back from all the state agencies, and then have the information to make your decision. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next card, please.
I believe it's K, it's ONGE, I believe.
Yes, my name is Kay St. Ange. I live at 2360 Maryland Avenue in Grove Park, Titusville, Florida. I would like extra minutes if possible because I will be speaking on behalf of 100 households, a petition that we have signed by signatures from 100 households in Grove Park.
Are any of those people here?
Some of them are here, some of them are not here.
I understand that part. I just asked, how many people here are giving up their time, please? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I can give you 10 minutes, ma'am.
Okay, that'll be fine. My neighbors became concerned about the development of this property when we received a notice of public hearing. And yes, it does say it is regarding the transmittal hearing, but it also gives us some summary that says this CPA summary is about changing the land use and zoning of the 13.12 acres. Me and my neighbors have come to this hall. This is our 3rd time. We've been to 2 other meetings with the developer and sometimes had 50 people show up. And as well, as I said, 100 households have signed this petition, which, as you will hear, has many concerns. So I wish to read you the petition. We, the undersigned residents of Grove Park, Titusville, are aware the city proposes to change the type of buildings allowed on the wooded 13.12 acres next to Grove Park, located on U.S. Highway 1 to the east of Tennessee Street and north of Silver Star Road. The city wants to allow a developer to build 3-story apartment buildings with 190, I believe he has 198 apartments at this time he plans on building. The apartment complex would possibly have an outlet onto Georgia Avenue. At present, the city would allow only hospital, medical, or light commercial building on this property. We oppose the rezoning of these acres to multifamily high density and the building of these apartment buildings for the following reasons. Number one, we believe the land should retain the hospital medical light commercial zoning to allow the building of medical facilities for Titusville's growing population. Number two, Grove Park is a single-family neighborhood. We oppose the building of 3-story apartment buildings with 198 apartments next to our single-family neighborhood. Number three, we oppose allowing any development of these 13.12 acres to have access onto Georgia Avenue. This would adversely affect the residents of Georgia Avenue and add traffic in all of Grove Park. The roads of Grove Park were not built to accommodate any additional traffic. Number four, we are concerned with the rapid growth of Titusville, with 4,700 housing units currently being proposed. Will the city be able to provide services for this rapid growth in population? Is there a need for so many housing units? Number five, as the city municipal code provides protection of habitat of threatened species, and as threatened painted buntings and gopher tortoises live in this wooded acreage, any proposed development should limit destruction of wooded habitat. A wooded buffer of existing trees as wide as possible on the west side of the development would provide habitat as well as screening to residents on Tennessee Street. Strict application of the Titusville Tree Ordinance should be followed. We request an environmental impact study. Number six, in 2016, the city allowed clearing of 28 acres adjacent to Grove Park for development. However, the development was never built. This clearing caused destruction of threatened species habitat and left an eyesore next to our neighborhood. We would like the city to guarantee that any development on the 13.12 acres only be allowed to commence with an assurance of completion. I would like to ask that all those opposed to the building of these apartments please stand. Thank you very much. So I do want to add a few more details to these concerns that we have, and we do realize that the developer has assured residents of Grove Park that he would make as a condition of the rezoning no access onto Georgia Avenue. Titusville aspires to be the gateway to nature and space. Annually, Titusville hosts the Space Coast Birding and Wildlife Festival across US 1 from Grove Park. Many birders attend the festival in hopes of sighting the beautiful painted bunting. Painted buntings winter in the wooded acreage adjacent to Grove Park, flying from these woods to residents' bird feeders. Titusville conservation elements ensure the protection of the habitat of threatened species as listed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. This agency lists the painted bunting as a bird of management concern protected under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. Another threatened species, the gopher tortoise, has been sighted on these acres. I make no apology for speaking on behalf of threatened species. The city's conservation element states that when one or more threatened species are documented to be present on a development site, all activities which may harm the species or their habitat shall cease. I have asked the Florida Audubon Society to help document the presence of painted buntings. The city's regulations require all developers to protect trees during construction, and natural vegetation shall be retained and protected. Yet the city is allowing the clear cutting of hundreds of acres of woodland in order to accommodate over 4,000 housing units at this time. Developers engineer Honeycutt admitted at the zoning meeting that he only plans on saving existing trees in a 20-foot wide buffer on the west side of his development. When asked by Commissioner Sievers, he would not commit to a conservation area to prevent the bulldozing of existing trees beyond this buffer. As Mr. Sievers pointed out, this acreage is in an area of critical concern. Therefore, only 40% can be impervious, requiring the developer to leave a large amount of green space. Yet he is proposing maximum density of 198 units. Benefits of retaining mature trees near new homes include reduction in air conditioning, absorption of carbon dioxide, and filtering of pollutants. The 13 acres of woods bordering Grove Park have for decades been a buffer from storm winds and US 1 traffic, have added beauty to our neighborhood and provided privacy. We would ask that any development retain as much woodland as possible. Woodlands adjacent to our neighborhood already suffered habitat degradation when in 2016, a 20-acre development was proposed to our north. Our neighborhood was able to convince developers to set aside over 7 acres of wildlife habitat, but 21 acres were significantly cleared for the development, which was commenced, then abandoned, leaving an eyesore where people dump trash. Now developers who previously attempted to develop to the north of Grove Park are attempting to develop to our east. The residents stand together in opposition to this high-density multifamily residence in these wooded acres. May the City Council keep in mind the city's motto, Titusville, Gateway to Nature and Space, start by declining to permit the clear-cutting and building of 198 apartment units on the 13.12 wooded acres east of Grove Park. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next card, please, clerk.
Lauren Flanagan.
Laureen Flanagan, 967 Tennessee Street, a registered nurse for 45 years. I spent the last 28 years working in the Massachusetts General Hospital burn unit, now retired. I oppose both the land change and the zoning change in CPA 4-2018. I definitely oppose a rental apartment complex with 198 units next to the Grove Park single-family neighborhood. I want the land to stay zoned hospital medical. The hospital medical zone land is in a perfect location for people to access any medically approved facility on US 1 and nearby to local pharmacies, dental offices, physical therapy center, outpatient orthopedic surgical center, or home care medical services. There are many medical options. Why change the zoning? The apartment complex can be moved to land zone multifamily high density in Titusville. Please don't give away hospital medical zoning for apartments. The City Council has the power to stop this zoning change. The city approved in 2018 4,700 homes, apartments, condos, and hotel rooms that could increase our population by 15,000. Adults, children, and the elderly, plus tourists. Our new residents will stress our current medical care system. Where is the land to build the needed medical facilities? Not all medical services will be built on the Parish Medical Center campus. In 2017, the Agency for Healthcare Administration in Florida designated Brevard County as medically underserved. We do not have enough primary care medical doctors, pediatricians, and OBGYN doctors in Brevard County. Florida's 2018 Physician Workforce Report states 15 to 20% of doctors in Brevard County plan on retiring in the next 5 years. Universal Health Services Incorporated, a national healthcare company trading on the New York Stock Exchange, built a facility in Titusville in 2018. Other national companies may build senior residences with assisted living or specialized memory loss assisted living facilities on this hospital medical zoned land. Protect the future public health of Titusville residents by keeping this land hospital medical zoning. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next card, please.
Ken Tolios.
Ken Tolios, 967 Tennessee Street. The proposed apartment complex is in my backyard. I'm strongly against the proposed land change and zoning change to multifamily high density. I'm strongly against the proposed 3-story apartments. They do not belong here. No parking, big problem. The problem starts with the city, with its outdated cars per household ratio. But in the end, the blame rides completely with the developer, Scott Banta, and his greed of dollar signs for extra apartments and drastic shortage of parking spaces. 198 apartments with 1.5 cars per unit, 279 spaces. We know most people would have 2 cars per household, equaling 396 spaces. If just 25 of those 198 units had a 3rd car, it brings us to 421 spaces needed. But people have visitors. Where do they park? But it gets worse. There is a clubhouse. Parties are held there, and some outsiders come to those parties. Where do they park? Well, for starters, many will park at Parish Medical Center until they finally get kicked out. They will next go to US 1, and they will be ticketed or towed. Next, they will park at Georgia Stubout, then in front of the houses on Georgia Ave, Tennessee Street, Maryland Ave. You get the picture. Not to mention all the fights in the apartment complex of someone else parking in their place. Police, I'm sure, will be called over and over. City Council, stop Steve Banta and his greed now. People before money, big bucks, stop here. We bought here on Tennessee Street in 2008. I'm not a person of money. I'm a middle-class person. I don't even have a retirement plan. I just collect Social Security. Our home here is our little paradise. Now this developer, Steve Banta, wants to take away our little paradise, and it seems like the city may be looking to do the same. We, the people of Grove Park, don't want the proposed apartments. Steve Banta, you see the big apartment complex as beautiful dollar signs. We see the apartment complex as a monster destroying our little paradise. To the City Council, do the right thing. People before money, the buck stops here. Tell the developer, Steve Banta, where to go. Go west of 95 and just keep going and don't stop. The people of Grove Park have spoken. Get the fox out of the hen house. We, the people of Grove Park, want to keep our little paradise. Listen to the people. Do the right thing. No apartments abutting our Grove Park single-family home neighborhood.
Sir,
Steve Banta plans...
Your time is up, sir. If you can wrap it up real quickly.
I will. It's just a short... Steve Banta plans on selling the complex for over $39 million, according to his figures. Big bucks stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next card, please.
Vicki Conrad.
Hello, and I appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak here. My name is Vicki Conrad. I'm third-generation Titusville as well. I've lived in the neighborhood for almost 25 years. My biggest concern, and it's been addressed, but too many times we've seen these things get developed and improve, and then you go in the end, and a lot of the things they promised never occurred. I do not ever want to see the Highway US 1 access or apartment access or shopping center access go into our neighborhood. That's my biggest problem with this situation. We have a tiny little spot here. I raised my kids here. I got grandkids here. People ride their bikes. There's other people that live on the back street that have small children that want to grow up there. We don't need the access to the apartment building, US 1, anything else that goes there. I just want to make sure that for all future, you keep that in consideration.
Thank you, ma'am. Next card, please.
David Monger.
How you doing? David Monger.
Sir, would you come up before you speak?
I got a few things to say about,
Sir, could I have your name and address?
David Munger.
Address?
2270 Maryland.
Thank you, sir.
I built the house back in like 91 or 2, something like that. There was no houses on the road. I was the only house. Well, then the houses move in, but they're homes, families that stay. When you're talking about apartment complexes, going to be people coming in and out, moving in and out. Just like this gentleman said, the developer, that his son goes to these places for construction work. Do you want construction workers by your house?
I actually have them by my house. I have them, some of the guys that worked on the mall.
Right.
Actually live in our condos.
Right, but
So-
they come in and go and, you know, I
No.
mean, I'm not saying for everyone, but.
I'm just saying.
And for, back to one-room apartments, and then the price of these condos or apartments, whatever you want to call them, $200,000. I've been here my whole life. I don't know anybody that makes that kind of money that's going to buy an apartment. Okay? And as far as the jobs, Space Center, we just laid off, 1,000 employees from SpaceX? Okay? These jobs that they talk about high dollars, they come and go. Contract ends every 3, 4, or 5 years, boom, you're gone. So I'm very familiar with that. I work out there. I've been laid off multiple times. Okay, so then you got your people that can't afford the rent, they move, you know. It's an ongoing thing. There's plenty other places here in Titusville to build where there's apartments, condos, whatever you want to call them. 405, how many acres are there that aren't developed? That's not too far. I mean, people that work at the hospital, they're not going to be, you know, necessarily just because they work at the hospital are going to be buying right there. They're families. Do you want to raise a kid in an apartment off of US 1 so your kids can go out and play next to US 1? I think not. So all we're doing is just asking y'all to really consider what's going on and how many apartment complexes are in proposal here in Titusville. Can we maintain that? Our roads coming into that neighborhood are the worst roads you'll ever drive on. Drive up and down Old Dixie or our Georgia Avenue one time. You better have a four-wheel drive and good shocks. You can't maintain that road right now. There's a lady I know sits out there almost once a week or once a month that takes pictures of those potholes and sends them to y'all city. I know she complains. I know she does. I mean, why, I don't understand why she, you know, isn't here, but
I have one quick question.
Yes, sir.
What road were you referring to? I missed the.
Georgia.
Okay.
And Old Dixie. And that's.
I think Old Dixie in that area is a county road.
We'll see, a lot of that was county, and then they, like that 20 acres that
I
they.
don't need an explanation. I'm just telling you that you said it comes to the city. It doesn't, so.
Well, Georgia is.
Georgia is, yeah.
And just like that 28 acres that they started develop, that's right behind us, and they never finished it. Well, that was all county too, but then they annexed it into city. Well, now there's a big ditch that runs behind all of our properties that nobody from the city is willing to come and clean out because they say it's not theirs. Then the county, you call them, they say it's not theirs, and then come to find out it was annexed to cities. So who's going to maintain all this?
I get your point, sir. Thank you. Next card, please.
Vanna Monger.
Hello, how are you?
Hello.
My name is Vanna Munger. I live at 2270 Maryland Avenue, and I work in the medical field here in Titusville and have for probably the last 20 years. I have been a resident of Grove Park for 42 years. First, I lived on Carolina Circle, where I grew up since I was 5 years old. And for the last 23 years, I have lived on Maryland Avenue. It has been a great neighborhood to raise a family and grow up in. Our neighborhood does not need or want the extra traffic, crime, and flooding, seeing that this contractor is wanting to kind of chum into our retention ponds. We do not want the noise that a complex would bring to our neighborhood. The city of Titusville, I am asking you to consider the health and wellness of the residents by keeping the zoning as medical. With so many apartments and housing projects coming into Titusville, we will need more medical facilities. It is now a minimum of a 2-week waiting period to get in to see a primary care physician for a new patient, some even longer. I spoke to 2 of our neighbors yesterday that are new to the area that said they had to wait 2 months to get in to see a primary care doctor. Some primary care doctors aren't even accepting new patients due to reaching retirement age. Many offices are looking for new buildings, so I have heard, being in the medical field. What more of a desirable location than across the street from the hospital? Many of our physicians are approaching retirement age, and we will need physicians and space for these facilities. I personally have worked for 3 brand new doctors who came into Titusville, opened their office, and a lot of them want to be close to the hospital. They want to have the convenience of seeing their patients, going to the hospital, doing their rounds, and being able to pop back to their office. So what a desirable location. Also, I would like for y'all to consider that we are growing, we are approving more apartment complexes, we are approving more neighborhoods, and eventually there is going to be no more land. So we need state-of-the-art medical facilities that will need to be new, that will need to be updated, and what a better location. So I'm asking you to keep this location zone medical. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next card, please.
Sandra Thorne.
Good evening. My name's Sandra Thorne. I live at 995 Alabama Street on the corner of Georgia and Alabama. And we have stormwater drainage problems in Grove Park and have had for years. And the apartment complex, with this apartment complex, water will just add more stress to our problem. The Kuzmas, who could not be here tonight, they sent you a presentation of the stormwater drainage problems in Grove Park with pictures for y'all to review. I don't know if you've looked at them or not, but you should have a presentation. The Grove Park neighborhood stormwater drainage system is ineffective and stressed by many existing issues and problems. It receives water from existing neighborhoods and drains under US 1 and Parish Medical Center to the Indian River. Rainstorms have caused our Grove Park city streets, Georgia Avenue, Tennessee Street, Maryland Avenue, plus our yards to flood for many years. Some residents have flooding up to their houses. Of course, the hurricane creates more water and more flooding. Flooding also occurs in other sections of Grove Park behind Carolina Circle and Alabama Street. We need our current stormwater system working to prevent this flooding. So we ask if you would review some of the pictures of the flooding and the drainage system. As you can see in some of the pictures, the streets were very flooded.
Are you through, ma'am?
Yes, I just wanted to put this for the Kuzmas who could not come tonight, and they live on Maryland at 2310 Maryland Avenue. Thank you.
Next card, please.
Bonnie Hall.
Hello, Bonnie Hall, 962 Tennessee Street. I had a PowerPoint, and I think you're getting a copy of it right now, that I was told just this morning that I could not present. Yes, it is. May I just use one as reference, please? Thank you. I took photos of the entire area around the site, and for those who are not familiar with it, it's a lovely green area. We've already talked about where the site comes off US 1 and onto Silver Star Road, so we're not going to continue to beat that horse. But the proposed site is in a small manufacturing and commercial area. The following businesses are all in this immediate area, and you can flip through and see Granite, Designs. You can look through and just see landscaping businesses, insulation, myriad businesses are in the immediate area. It is not a residential area. We've already talked about the vegetation being clear-cut, so again, I'm not going to get into that. We do oppose that. The commercial area is really quite poorly kept, and it is ugly. It would not be a place for families to live, and certainly not for luxury rental units. Towing, auto center. And then I come to, this was referenced today, that here's our building site that we're looking at, and 3 streets away is this street called Mayfair Way. It has 2-story, high-density residential rental units right now. Many of the buildings are actually empty. They have been empty for years, and I have photos of those as well. There is land for sale that is already zoned high-density residential on Mayfair Way. They're already being used for these 2-story rental units. If we have these sitting empty, why are we going to add more units to those who are going begging already? They're vacant, empty, unwanted. I then came to, this is my own house on Tennessee Street. People in our neighborhood love our homes. We have pride of ownership. We take care of our homes. We take care of each other. We are a true neighborhood community. And I guess that's about it.
Thank you, ma'am. Next card, please.
Ron Swank.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for being here tonight for us to hear our concerns. I live at 2210 Georgia Avenue, which is, and I bought this house in 1984, and I've lived there ever since. This is my home, my community. In a perfect world, we'd love to keep that area just nothing but woods. In a perfect world. We know it's not going to happen. We have property rights, and they have property rights, so we're just trying to come up with a balance between the property rights. The contractor has met with the community a couple times and have come up with several of the stipulations they have laid forward, which I thought was a positive move forward. It addresses several of the concerns. One of the concerns, they say that they will not be using Georgia stub out. Well, in the staff report, it says that they will be using Georgia stub out, but the contractor's saying they're not. Based on that, the city has standing on a lot on that particular stub out, and I would like to request that the city vacate that stub out, since it is obviously not going to be needed, and it won't be needed for the transmittal. So the city could take that as an action to let the citizens know that you are looking forward to their property rights and our property rights. Some of the confusion that has come up was that this is a future land use map change instead of a zoning, but it was advertised as both. The CPA is both the future land use and the zoning. So that added confusion to some of the people out there, and that's why addressing all these other issues. One of the other items that they addressed was a fence and vegetative buffer around the facility, which would stop pedestrians from coming into the neighborhood. With the vegetative buffer, if it was, originally they were talking 48 feet, which would be okay to keep natural vegetation there, the natural trees and such, but if they're dropping it down to the 20 feet, then you're not going to get much of the natural to stay. So basically, one other comment is staff report said that this high-density residential is a transitional from single family. To my opinion, it's not a transition from an R1C to R3. It's not a transitional state. R2 might be transitional, but not R3 in my opinion. Basically, that's all I have. If there's any questions.
Any questions from council? I don't see any. Now I do.
Yeah, maybe Peggy can answer this one. Could you explain why it was advertised as both on what he touched on, changing the future land use map and the rezoning from hospital to R3?
It is a...
Just to clarify.
Yeah, it's just a common application because that way we have all the information together. Actually, I think staff is going to be rethinking that because I think that it does cause a level of confusion. It's the way that it's been done here for a number of years, but there are two separate actions and two separate analysis of the land use and then the rezoning.
Okay.
But the honest truth is that most people understand zoning a lot better than land use, and the specifics of a project usually matter a great deal. So it's very, very common that when you are talking about land use, that the next question is, well, what are you going to put up there?
Right. So are both going for the transmittal or just the?
Zoning doesn't get transmitted, only the land use.
So it would just be the low intensity to the high density residential?
That's
that we're
correct.
going. Okay, thank you for clarifying.
And Mr. Mayor, if there's just one other comment, generally planning zoning is they provide their information to you and you make the decision off of that. Historically, this council has gone with what the Planning and Zoning Commission has brought forward historically, not all the time, but historically. It's you know, with a 6-0, it's kind of that's a big hump to get over. You know, to say, okay, planning zoning, we're not going to listen to you now. Just something to toss out there.
Thank you, sir.
Just to make things more difficult for you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Swank. I know you have experience in sitting up here, so I appreciate that comment.
Thank you very much. And if you would reconsider that vacating of that Georgia stub out, I think that would help a lot.
I have it written down, sir. Thank you. Next card, please.
The last card is Kathy Swank.
Good
evening. I'm Kathy Swank. I live at 2210 Georgia Avenue. Ron Swank is my husband. He was on council for 10 years, so I'm very familiar with a lot of zonings, too much about sewage, all kinds of things that I've tripped over in the middle of the night. So I appreciate what you do. I know it's hard. One of the things that I have a problem with is, well, there's 4 things. The stub out on Georgia, the fence, the stormwater, and the area of critical concern. Back in 1993, we came to City Council because they were going to put in a medical or whatever. They got the zoning for the medical. So they wanted to come through Georgia Avenue. At the time, we explained we didn't want the traffic through our neighborhood. It would be a cut-through. So they said that they would not they would put it down that they would not go through Georgia Avenue. Now here we are again, and we're talking about Georgia Avenue as a cut-through. Y'all own a piece of property right next door to us that used to be a stormwater retention pond. If you vacate that stub out, we won't be back here complaining about Georgia Avenue and the traffic coming into our neighborhood. We live there and raised 2 children there. My tree in the front yard has every kid in the neighborhood's initials on it. 16 of us was pregnant at the same time. They went to grammar school, middle school, high school, off to college, and now they're raising their own kids. We found out that our kids are going to come back home, and they have 2 little ones, and we don't want the traffic going by them. They are building a new home. So they're coming back to mom and dad until they get the new home built. So that's the way that neighborhood has been. We never have a home last no more than a month or 2 months on a market. It's gone, it's sold. The other problem I am very concerned about is the retention pond. It took 11 years to get that to go underneath US 1 to handle all the drainage from 5 neighborhoods. Comes plumb off down on Singleton, Shady Oaks, and the water goes into our retention ditch. We were flooded over and over. Sometimes we were flooded in the house for 2 weeks. We couldn't even get out. I could step out my front door and go knee deep. So it's took them that long to go out, go under US 1, go to the chain of lakes. It's working better, but we still have problems with heavy rain. It floods. Floods bad. But it drains off fast. But there's something wrong with the retention pond. We are not sure what it is. They have 3 retention. Can I have a few more minutes?
Can you get it done in 1 minute?
Probably not, because I get nervous and I stutter. And
Okay.
I'll tell you the truth, but I'll try.
Council, can we have 2 more minutes for this lady?
I'd make that motion.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say yes? Yes. You got it.
We have the retention pond that's over here that goes out under US 1. They have 3 ponds that they are going to dump into our retention pond, which they say is capable of going under. The corporates will handle it. I don't know. I'm not an engineer. But so far, it looks like it's not handling enough. Then we have that 28 acres over here that's clear. Where is their water going? Everybody wants to use that under the US 1 because it's cheaper. They don't want to put anything under US 1 themselves. I am neither for or against the apartment complex. They own it. I am worried about the noise because every time they cut down the trees, I have an area because of the hospital, we can hear all the sirens and everything, and it's loud because they took all those trees down because of our retention pond. If they got another retention pond, they have to have it where they can get around it. There won't be any big trees, and we're going to have a wide space between our house and US 1. So the noise is a lot of problem. And area of concern, only 20 feet around. We have some beautiful oak trees that have been there for years and years and years. 20 feet, he says there are 100 feet between us and their buildings, but we have clear area for parking that up against us, and a retention ditch that they want to go all the way down Tennessee, and then only 20 feet of trees, which is not going to block a lot of noise. And they said they're going to put an OPAG fence. I don't like the word OPAG. They said they're going to put up a PC pipe, a solid one. Concrete's better because it's not going to blow down or get damaged, or people are not going to knock out a section to come through our neighborhood. We don't want all the kids coming to play in our neighborhood with their bikes and so forth. 197, that's 1,000 trips a day going back and forth if they come through Georgia or more. And they will cut through to go to all the grocery stores that's in, because we do it. Everybody cuts through the different neighborhoods. So you open it up, they cut through. And one other thing, 1988, they had a blanket ordinance change. That property got changed over. We don't know what it was before. But if there was only one way in and out, I assume it would be R1C, because we had the only way you could get into that back area because you could not go over the railroad track. It was hard to get another approval to go over the railroad track at the time. So I don't know. You know, I think R3 is too much. It's just R2 might be better, but that's just something to think about. Don't flood my house again. I don't want to go fishing out my front door. I don't want to see water moccasins swimming down my street. And I have seen kids take boats and go down the street. So the drainage is bad. It just needs to be really checked to be sure that we're capable of handling all these waters from these two projects. Thank you very much, and I'm sorry that I can't talk faster.
That's all right.
I'm
Thank you,
very
ma'am.
southern, and we're very slow.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
It's good to see you. There are no more cards? Is that correct?
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am. Wait, let me, it's me. Sir, you're up.
Rodney Honeycutt, 3700 South Washington Avenue. I wasn't going to mention any of the zoning or land development issues that would actually come after if zoning was approved. But as far as the drainage, Grove Park has no retention ponds. There's a retention pond that the county owned, and I don't know if the city accepted it when they annexed or not, but there's a major canal that drains into that. And looking at it, it looks like the overflow structures are high and could be lowered. We will not be contributing to that problem. And we will, to an extent possible, look into that and see if we could get them lowered once we find out who it is and help with their drainage problems. But that's not part of what we're discussing tonight. This is only a transmittal to the state for the land use change. And there's been no facts presented tonight that that land use change request should not be submitted. No facts submitted to contrary of that. This is a nice community, and the developer has gone beyond the code requirement quite a bit with conditions that he agrees to. And their own record tonight, I know that they don't go with the land use change, but they're on the land use change to recognize the concerns of that community and to keep it a nice community. Last thing, I was involved in the rezoning from R3 residential high density to hospital, medical, and the low intensity commercial use. And we had the same complaints back then. They didn't want that to happen. They wanted it to be an apartment complex. So just the bottom line is they would like not to see anything there. I don't think that's fair to the owner of that property. And I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions? I don't see any at this point.
Thank you.
Any of the other members of the applicant team? No, nobody does anything. Sorry, ma'am.
Hi, Scott Banta, 97 Hickory Tree Road, Longwood, Florida. Thank you again for the opportunity, number one, to bring the project to your attention and also to speak again. This is a plan that was done that is medical office buildings. So what happens relative to clear cutting, and it doesn't really matter whether it's a single-family residential community or a commercial facility or an apartment complex, what will happen is you have a very strict tree ordinance, which we'll, obviously have to comply with. There are some nice oaks on the property, but the majority of the trees are pines. As we know, that pines don't handle development very well. The big trees will be either we'll leave them or replace them, whatever, in order to satisfy your requirements. From the retention standpoint, we have pre-post, as you know, which is we cannot exceed post-development any drainage that we have pre-development. And with regard to the flooding, again, as Rodney said, we'll be taking a look at seeing if we can do that. You'll see that this plan has units or buildings that are actually in this particular plan 20 or 10 feet away, but it would be a minimum of 20 feet away. But they could be 20 feet, those 2 or 3 story medical office buildings, 20 to 30 feet from the backyards, which would be about the same as having a single family house there. We've agreed to a minimum setback, building setback of 100 feet and only allowing those westerly buildings to be 2-story. Continual comments about Georgia Avenue. We've specifically said that we would agree to fence the north side, the west side, and the south side, and cut off that vehicular access to Georgia. It works basically for us and for the neighborhood. We really don't want all the neighborhood people coming in our project, and they don't want us going in their housing area. The Georgia cutoff is really not an issue as far as I'm concerned, because as long as staff ends up agreeing to, and you, the city council, agrees to cutting off Georgia, we're fine with that. And this is most likely going to end up being a gated community. So with out on down to Silver Star, and then hopefully a entrance across the street from the hospital. Parking was brought up. Parking is strictly regulated by the city, as are the environmental issues. Also, any of the threatened or endangered species or any of that have to go through Florida Freshwater Fish and Game Commission. I think we want, as the city, we want to have Eastern Florida State College expand. They're going to need housing. This would be an opportunity for them. My wife and I go to a lot of concerts. As an aside, we go down to Eastern Florida State College down in Melbourne for a lot of those concerts. It'd be nice to have some of that stuff here. The trail system is wonderful, and you have an incredible park, chain of lakes, plus 2 or 3 downtown parks that are all accessible via the trail. We're very happy about that. In terms of the hospital's expansion, they have the land, as Rodney mentioned earlier, on the east side, but also we're seeing all throughout the entire Orlando area where the hospitals are all branching out. So they're doing clinics and emergency facilities, et cetera, that are off-site. So a lot of that expansion will be going out into the community, and we don't see a lot of it happening here. Solomere Grand is full. It was fully leased up on a very quick lease up. Shows the apartments that are necessary. If you go look at the ones on the other street that the lady was mentioning, they're not the most attractive units in Central Florida. And parking, I think I mentioned. We roughly work off on a commercial basis about 10,000 square feet per acre. At 13 acres, roughly, there could be 130,000 feet of medical type facilities here on the site. And it could be, and you'll see by that site plan there that there, they wouldn't even leave, I guess they'd have to leave the 20-foot buffer on the westerly side, but that would be it. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer. We would certainly appreciate you moving this forward to the state, and we thank you for your time.
I don't see any buttons. No? I don't see anybody asking.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is Mr. Serrato still there? I can't see behind that sign.
Yes.
Do you wish to speak, sir?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, I will close the public hearing at this point. Counsel?
Okay, I certainly listen with interest, but being the new person on the board, I tend to want to do what we're supposed to be doing here, and we're focused on a transmittal. This has nothing to do with zoning or anything like that, but I did listen with interest. There are some concerns from people who've been in the neighborhood a very long time, and they like what they have. I'm a businessman also, and I certainly believe in people who have land being able to do what they need to do in order to have a return on their investment. This happens to be, because I didn't agree with everything Mr. Serrato was saying, since I'm the vice chairman of Parish Medical Center, but I would accept that.
Answer any questions?
No, it's no, I don't need your answer. I'm just telling you I don't agree with some of the things you were saying about the status of where Parish Medical Center is, because they weren't true. But based on that,
Tell me what it is, and I'll
based on that,
Gentlemen, we can't have a...
right, based on...
You'll be allowed to come back up again, sir, if you'd like.
Right. Based on what I know and based on where we're going with the city, to me, this is a good application of what we need to do with that land. What I do like is that the developer is listening to the neighbors, talking about Georgia Avenue, cutting that off, making sure that there's no way that people can go through Georgia Avenue, because you have a surreal place there and you want to keep it like that. I agree with that as far as having the buffer. Actually, I kind of agree with the request for a concrete fence. I don't think that's going to happen. That's a lot of money to have a concrete fence, especially when you have that much area to cover. The buffer that you're having, 100 feet, from the closest residents in the back on the west. That seems very reasonable to me, for sure. I just think that this developer is trying to do everything he possibly can to be a good neighbor. As I say, this is no rezoning or anything tonight, so if it's appropriate, I believe my motion would be for us to move this along and
Can we wait, sir, for that?
Well, I can do it and discuss
I'll call you
it.
to make the motion when the time comes, but we want to go ahead and have some discussion before. That's our normal procedure, sir.
You're the mayor.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Mr. Serrato, I said you could come back again. Perhaps you don't need to after hearing.
If there's a question, I'd be happy to.
There's no
I have a
question.
question.
Okay, then I'm fine, thank you.
What do we have? Vice Mayor.
I would start by reiterating this is a transmittal and that this is another step. But that being said, I heard some concerns, and I definitely think that the developer and Rodney are working on those. I heard them say beforehand there's no Georgia access. Then I heard the citizens say many times we're concerned about the Georgia access. Then you guys came back up again and said there's no Georgia access. So, you know, that would certainly, if I lived in that area, that would be a concern for me too. So I'm convinced you're taking that very seriously, and I appreciate that because, you know, there can't be any misunderstanding on that. That's a big deal. I heard the word habitat protection, retain as much woodland as possible. I really feel like most everything I wrote down you guys had addressed, and your good faith will be very important once we, you know, if we move forward after the transmittal. The thing that probably concerned me the most, and you kind of answered that too, was the flooding that I saw in the pictures. I can't remember who presented the pictures, but I thought those were very pertinent. You know, when you open your door and you step into 3 feet of water, that's a real concern for me. But it seems as though your reply is that's got nothing to do with what you're going to do, and I think it's an awful nice gesture if you can kind of help them out with that. But if there is more retention water, you know, or you do affect that, well, it won't be stepping in 3 feet of water, it'll be 3 feet of water in the house. And so that's a concern for me, but again, I think that you guys are addressing all of those, and I appreciate that. I'm not the expert on that, but it does seem to me that, and Mr. Serrato, I think, addressed that first, was that there seems to be plenty of medical space in Titusville. I believe it was 40% of the, thank you, Ms. Busaka. I believe it was 40% of the Titus Landing Medical Center is still available.
Well, I'm told that only the first floor is full out of the 3
Sir,
floors.
if you're going to ask
Okay.
a question, he has to come up to the mic.
You can just nod.
He just asked.
You can just nod. The point I'm making is I kind of had felt the same way. As a matter of fact, as a city council person, I really like to see those things filled up. And I'm waiting for them to get filled up. And then I think you were the one who also spoke of the medical area over there that's not being used next to the hospital. So I don't know that I'm overly concerned about that. There was some talk about long waits and you can't get into the doctor and all that. And I don't know that that area is going to affect the long waits sort of thing. But I certainly have an empathy here, but I also understand, and Member Jordan noted that, you know, as a businessman he is, I'm not, but I do know that if he's a property owner, you want to do what's best for that property. I would feel more comfortable if it was a housing development, but leaving it at that, that's not my call. I kind of like the R2 instead of R3, but that being said, I finish with this is a transmittal to the state for them to look it over and then send it back. We don't make a decision tonight, a yes or no. We are working on a transmittal. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Member Stokel.
Thank you. Ms. Busaka, would you mind just explaining what the state's going to be looking at when we send the transmittal?
The state looks at issues that are statewide issues. They will talk about, first of all, is it consistent with our comprehensive plan? They want to make sure that we have the need for additional multifamily. So they will ask those kinds of questions to staff if the transmittal information doesn't provide adequate information. They will also send it to DOT, who would look at impacts to state transportation. They would send it to DEP for environmental issues. They would send it to the Water Management District and the Regional Planning Council.
Okay, and if they come back and say they have no issues, what would be the next potential step moving forward?
Then it would come back to public hearing. Whether they say they have issues or not, we have a report. It goes back through the same process that it has been through, which is through planning and zoning and then back to council. And at that time, there would be two considerations, the land use and the zoning. The land use would have a large number of zonings that could be appropriate. Now, the applicant proposes, but that land use includes a wide range of uses, as do all land uses.
Okay, and just to clarify, so with this transmittal, there would be no potential R2, for instance, with this transmittal going forward? That would have to be a separate transmittal if we were interested in R2.
In my experience, if you were to have a more intense land use transmitted, and then you decided to have a less intense land use adopted, the state very seldom has any issues with that.
Okay.
If you go the other direction,
correct,
that is may cause more concerns.
Okay. Yeah, so I guess moving forward, my opinion, I would tend to agree with Member Diesel. I would appreciate R2 a lot more, just considering the residents that are here, just looking at the surrounding area. That being said, I understand something would need to go there. And obviously, we have property owners and property rights to see what would be most beneficial from their viewpoint. I'm okay with going through with the transmittal. I'd like to continue to meet with the residents and see, because I do feel like some of the resident concerns were addressed, especially no access to the roads. I heard that loud and clear, and I would really hope if we move forward with this, there would be no access. I like the fence idea. I like the buffer idea. Anything we can do to keep their neighborhood as it is now, with still having something else for our residents as we are growing. And I'm hopeful that we do have a lot of jobs coming here, a lot more people coming here as we're growing. So I would be okay moving forward with the transmittal, but I'm glad that the state will be looking at some of these concerns with water, with environmental, that we can kind of address these, because some of these pictures made me take a step back. I'm like, ooh, I don't know how I feel about that, but that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Member Nelson.
Well, I would agree with the Vice Mayor and Member Stokel. It seems, when I looked at it, it just seemed like such an abrupt transition from this single-family residence to these apartments. And I had questions about that, and I kept thinking there's got to be something a little bit better than these apartments. But that being said, and I had some problems with the flooding, stormwater pond retention areas, and you know, that needs to be addressed. But I don't have a problem with transmitting it and getting some more answers. And I guess that's what I look at is, if we transmit it, we're going to have more answers. And these people will have more answers. And then we can sit down and look at it and say, do we want it or not?
If I could, the land development regulations related to stormwater are the same regardless of whether it is multifamily residential, single family, commercial, industrial.
Correct.
We have, so whatever drainage issues are resolved or not resolved will be unrelated to land use or zoning.
Okay.
Because the requirements are the same.
Okay.
That's also true when it comes to the requirements for land clearing. They are the same regardless of what type of zoning it is.
Okay. I just feel like we're going to have more answers when it comes back. regarding what's on that property, what can be done. So I can live with that, but I do want the answers, and I think these people probably want the answers also.
Before I ask you to make a motion, I'd like to make a comment.
Yes, sir.
Regardless at this point, I think that everybody's had a very good input, and everybody has taken back something from both sides at this point. As long as, if a project goes forward, it was mentioned, and Georgia Street still seems to be of high question on this, it was suggested that we vacate that stub, which I will say that if that time comes and there's still a project going there, I will ask the council to agree to vacate that stub. So that part can at least go away tonight. With that, sir, motion from you?
I have one other question to ask you. What's the difference between R2 and R3?
R2 is considered multifamily up to 9 units an acre.
Okay.
And R3 would be multifamily up to 15 units an acre.
Okay, just the caution of the council, this deal could stop if they can't get the return on investment with R2 versus R3. So, you know, we're making, this is just a transmittal, so when we start talking about rezoning or saying, okay, this is the only thing that we will be happy with, you could end up with nothing happening at all and not having the product that we need for those engineers and others who are coming into the city. So with that being said, I move that we, oh, where did it go? I'm going to get it back. Which one was it? There it is. Right there. I got it. I move that we submit the Comprehensive Plan Amendment, CPA number 4-2018-Serato, to, is that to the state? To the state.
Yes, to the state.
Yeah.
Is that it?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Do I have a second? Second. I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Not hearing any. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed, like sign. Passes unanimously. So it's going to be transmitted. You will have opportunity after that's done to come back and rediscuss what we have talked about tonight and whatever other ideas you have. So thank you very much for coming.
Will we be notified?
Yes.
Sir?
Will we be notified?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to ask for a 10-minute recess for the council to allow everybody to leave and allow us to take a break.
Both of y'all eat.
Are you leaving?
I said 2. I said 2.
Who's going?
That's right. Put you right down.
Oh my God. No, you said 8. You went 8. Both. Yeah, both of them. And I said 2.
Yeah, well, that is.
See, I'm a good ESE person now.
Huh?
I'm like a good ESE person.
Shoot, we're looking for ESE people right now. It's hard to find.
Well, as you know, they're shooting at us. So from last year, we've still got some compliance.
Yeah, you got a lot of hours you haven't done.
No, we got the.
Okay, we're back. Whoops, pressed the wrong one. Next item is item 9C. Mr. City Attorney, you?
Yes, sir. 9C is ordinance number 3, 2019, related to off-street parking. Ordinance number 3, 2019, an ordinance of the City of Titusville, Florida, amending the Code of Ordinances by amending Chapter 28 zoning, specifically amending Sections 2854 use table and 28149 off-street parking lots to amend off-street parking lots from a permitted use with limitations to a conditional use in the urban mixed-use UMU district, allowing off-street parking lots as a conditional use within the regional mixed-use RMU zoning district, specifically the RMU 300 and RMU 400 sub-districts, and amending the standards for conditional uses, providing for severability, repeal of conflicting ordinances, an effective date, and incorporation into the code. And this is a first reading and first public hearing.
The Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval of this action 7-0. The second reading and final public hearing is scheduled for February 26, 2019 at 6:30 p.m. Ms. Bisaka is available to answer any questions that you may have concerning this action.
Council, any questions of Ms. Busaka at this time? I see none. City Clerk, I'll open the public hearing. Are there any cards on this item?
We have one card. It's Kim Razanka.
Name and address, please.
I'm going to pass out, so I don't, not pass out. I'm going to pass out documents. So I
Don't pass out, please.
I'm not going to pass out.
Not that big a deal.
So I don't eat into my 3 minutes, because I can't do much of anything in 3 minutes. Please don't move it. I'm just going to, there's 3 different documents.
Frankly, you can ask for additional time.
I've seen that. Thank you.
It becomes easier when you don't have 26 people behind you. Isn't it? You got one? You got enough?
Yes, sir.
Is this 2 or 1? I guess it's 2. Is there one on the bottom too? I got this somehow. No, guess not.
I wasn't sure I was going to use them all, otherwise I would have put them all together.
Okay.
I apologize.
Whenever
But
you-
as I had time to think, I figured I'd use them all. Okay, my name is Kim Razanka. I'm an attorney with Cantwell and Goldman in Cocoa, Florida. I am here about this ordinance. I represent an owner of commercial property located on Garden Street. It's a multi-tenant building. He needs more parking. He owns land across the street that's vacant that he wants to put in off-street parking for his tenants and his tenants' invitees. I met with staff to discuss this. We thought we were going to need a rezoning and a future land use amendment on this less than half an acre of property, and it really wouldn't be compatible with what's there. But this is the downtown area, and staff felt that it would be appropriate to change the zoning code to allow off-street parking in the urban mixed use. And that's what this is, that my client owns the other property in. And so when I met with staff, it was my understanding this was going to be a permitted use, not a conditional use. When I got the draft ordinance, there was a typo on the matrix that said it was a permitted use, not a conditional use. I didn't want to talk at P&Z. That Planning and Zoning Board meeting went till about 11:30, so I didn't bring it up at that point. And I did want to talk to staff and see why they had changed their mind, and I understand that there are some parking lots that have problems, but this is a very small piece of land. And we do appreciate the staff's willing to make the change, even as it is. However, I'm here to request that you consider allowing off-street parking in the urban mixed use to be a permitted use, not a conditional use. That would be removing urban mixed use from D1 of this ordinance. The reasons for this request. First, I've given you this map that I've highlighted in yellow. I accidentally put one industrial, so I put a little X over it. But this is a very limited area of urban mixed use, and it is in a downtown area. And so it's not going to have a great impact as some of the others might, the community commercial, the neighborhood commercial, if those were permitted uses. When you look at the urban mixed use ordinance, section 28-325, this downtown parking, off-street parking meets the purpose of the urban mixed use. A mix of residential and commercial uses, ensuring adequate buffers and screening, and flexibility in development. Furthermore, I think that the standards in D1 are unnecessary for urban mixed use by the very terms of your use table, for one thing. In the standards in D1, subsection A, deals with lighting. Well, you're not supposed to impact other people with your lighting. That's usually in performance standards. I don't know your code well enough, but if someone's getting light shine in their window, they're going to complain and code enforcement's going to come out. The 1B, no movement of vehicles, again, this is for commercial uses. It's not a nighttime thing. It's not going to have storing. It's not going to have parking. Then the next standard, may I have 2 more minutes, please?
Counsel?
Make that motion.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say yes. Yes. You got it.
Thank you. Then subsection C, shall not allow sales, outdoor storage, or any kind of off-street, or any kind of services. And when you look at your use code, it specifically doesn't allow those in the urban mixed use. Especially on page 2, at the very bottom of the page, outdoor storage, it's not allowed for any purpose in urban mixed use. So your own matrix code makes that somewhat irrelevant. You don't need that so much. Again, shall not allow parking of automobiles to a period of 24 hours. That's certainly not the intent. This intent is to be fenced off, so it will be closed at night so you don't have people parking overnight. It's for tenants and their invitees. And then a traffic study. I'm concerned about E because I don't know when a traffic study is going to be required. We have a less than a half-acre lot. I can't imagine a traffic study would be, but that's somewhat vague and ambiguous. So those are part of the reasons for this particular use. Your options are to allow off-street parking as a permitted use, as I've requested, or what the county does is they have something called uses with conditions. So this would just be, it's a permitted use, but it has conditions. And those conditions are stated. These are conditions that would be in a conditional use. So why do you have to go through the process of a conditional use? If you have a off-street parking and urban mixed use, you must meet all these criteria. You don't have to have it in a conditional use permit. It's just in your ordinances. So that's what I'm somewhat used to with Brevard County. Or you can go forward with staff's recommendation and leave it as it is. It will cost my client about $1,700 to go for a conditional use to build this parking lot for his tenants. And you won't see me back until late June. It'll take that long before I can get back to you on a conditional use permit. My tenant bought this property thinking he was going to be able to put parking on it and can't. So I know it's somewhat of a selfish request, but I don't think it's necessary to make this ordinance for urban mixed use to be a conditional use for off-street parking. So I'd ask you consider those items. Thank you.
Member Stokel has a question for you.
All right, maybe for Ms. Busaka, do you see any issues with why a conditional use permit would be potentially better for us as opposed to permitted?
The reason that this is recommended as a conditional use is because we have staff who's had a previous experience in other communities and have found that in some instances, parking lots were causing a lot of problems. Now, if there is always a way to compromise and come to some middle ground. one of the things that council could decide is that they wanted to consider something of a certain size, half acre, something like that, to be a limited use, which is exactly what Ms. Rosenka was talking about. They call it in the county permitted use with conditions. We call it a limited use, but it's the same where you would have specific conditions that would be required, because it is the problems that the staff had identified in the other community was in larger areas, and it was these lots that were open 24 hours a day, and so there may be a way that if you feel that in some instances we could go back, we could look at that, come back to you. Depending on what our recommendation is, it may require rezoning, a re-advertising, but we could certainly do that. And the conditional use permit, you may want to consider for the larger lots, or we could talk about areas that, for instance, had more residential, although urban mixed use does have residential in it. So if you direct us to, staff can certainly move some things around and have some other options. But this was strictly done because of bad experience that other communities have experienced.
Okay, yeah, just looking at this, if that's, it does seem like a very small area with very limited property, so, and if you're looking at $1,700 to apply for something, that would probably get approved for all of this area potentially. I don't know, I'd be open to seeing if we can make that a little bit easier.
Anything else? Member Nelson?
I would agree with Member Stokel that the limited use seems like it would be very appropriate. And I'm assuming that you would be able to fashion it where it would be appropriate for any parking lot in that area.
We could certainly work on that, absolutely.
And
If,
that would
in the
sort of-
UMU, yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
We could.
Anyone else? This is first reading, so no decisions will be made tonight. You have a request to work on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item.
Next item is ordinance number 4, 2019, related to the wetland and conservation area. An ordinance of the City of Titusville, Florida, amending Chapter 29 Special Districts and Overlays of the Code of Ordinances, specifically amending Article 4 Wetland and Conservation Area, WCA, Sections 29, 71, intent, to clarify the intent of the overlay as related to conservation easements and other preservation mechanisms. Amending Sections 2972 Permitted Zoning Districts, 2974 Conditional Uses, and 2976 Official Map to include Planned Development PD as a permitted zoning district and modify conditional uses within the overlay, providing for severability, repeal of conflicting ordinances for an effective date and incorporation into the code. This is the first reading and first public hearing.
The Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval of this action 7-0. Their motion included adding clarification language that reads, "The park and open space uses as authorized in the Plan Development Division." The second reading and final public hearing is scheduled for February 26, 2019 at 6:30. Mr. Spisak is available.
Any comments? Any questions from council for staff? I see no lights. Are there any cards on this?
No, sir.
Okay. It does not require a vote, so we'll go on to the next item. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Next item is E, ordinance number 5, 2019, an ordinance to the City of Titusville, Florida, amending Chapter 27 General Provisions of Land Development Regulations, specifically amending Section 2721 Comprehensive Plan Future Land Use Categories, amending the Future Land Use Zoning Consistency Matrix to permit planned development PD zoning within conservation and downtown mixed-use land use districts, providing for severability, repeal of conflicting ordinances for an effective date, and for incorporation into the code.
This is the first reading and public hearing. The second reading and final public hearing is scheduled for February 26, 2019 at 6:30. The Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval 7-0. Their motion included that no more than half of the land set aside for the 35% park and open space requirement of the PO ordinance shall be from conservative land use area. Ms. Busaka is available to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions of Ms. Busaka? I see none. Would we?
Well, I was just going to say that we are not sure exactly that this recommendation, this is a good place to put this comment, because I feel like an asterisk at the bottom of a table is likely to get lost. So if the concept of changing, of only allowing a percentage of conservation to be considered within the PD ordinance, then it should probably be shown in the PD ordinance. And occasionally you will hear about mistakes that get made and people will say to you, how did that happen? This is the way that happens. Because if it's not in a place that all of us know it exists, it gets overlooked. The other issue that we have is that we think that this may have some unintended consequences, and we are going to take the initiative to review what this recommendation would mean and bring it back to you at the next meeting.
Is that sufficient for everybody? Sounds like a good idea to me, too. Council, any other questions of staff? Are there any cards on this, Clerk? No, sir. Okay, there is no vote necessary on this one. Next item, please. As soon as I turn the page.
Yes, sir, we're up to 11A, the bridge over sign.
Yes, sir.
Signage. In March 2016, council approved signs to be mounted on the pedestrian bike overpass over Garden Street, SR 406. The west side elevation, welcome to Titusville, gateway to nature and space. And on the east side of the elevation, Titusville Trails. Staff then proceeded to have engineering designs drafted by Don Bell Signs of Port Orange. Don Bell and the design build contractor also provided estimate pricing for the construction and installation should the city wish to proceed. The signs would be highly visible in the daytime and also lit at night with backlighting. The purpose of the signs are to highlight the three converging trails and market the city as a gateway to nature and space. The Coast to Coast Trail is part of a 250-mile trail that will link Titusville with St. Petersburg. Titusville is also the southern tip of the 260-mile St. Johns River Sea Loop, which merges with the East Coast Greenway, which is a 2,900-mile route between Maine and Key West. In 2018, Titusville was designated a Florida Trail Town. Sign design and overview will be provided during the City Council meeting. So what we're asking for based on the price, we have a presentation I think Jim's going to provide to you, is your guidance of how to proceed with the signage that Council recommended a while ago. So Mr. Thomas, Jim?
Jim Thomas, Community Relations. Good evening, Council. It's still early. I was going to say good night, Council, but we're still early. And I'm here with all my admirers, as you can see. Scott's already, City Manager Scott has already covered some of the things I was going to say in the slide, so we can move along pretty quickly here. It's much of the same information, the connecting trails, the fact that we were second in the state to be designated a trail town. One other little thing I'd like to mention is we truly are the gateway to nature and space. I used to live on South Merritt Island, and I grew up here, and I used to want my friends to come up here, go to the Merritt Island Wildlife Refuge, Playa Linda. You couldn't even get to the Merritt Island Wildlife Refuge from Merritt Island. You have to come up here, come around. So, and as you guys sit up here always dealing with development and everything else, the whole state's doing that, the whole country's doing that, but especially this city, this county, the state. So that green space out there, that's going to become huge as time goes on. People are going to want to see what Florida was like, and it's still just like that right now. And as City Manager Larice said, Titusville Trails, welcome to Titusville, gateway to nature and space. That was what was approved. Gateway to nature and space would be on the entrance side on the west side coming into town and going out of town, if that's what you chose to do. And of course, the other side would be Titusville Trails. We did some mock-ups. They were looked at by council and approved, and they were strictly just that mock-ups so that they would have an idea, a concept. And they asked for some cost, what would it take? And so I sourced a design build contractor. That wasn't that easy because you can't just go to signs of all kinds and they can hang something over a state or a federal highway. But I remembered a sign in Daytona Beach on I-95 from years ago, and that picture was all over the early days of the internet. And it's not because people loved that sign and wanted to have a picture of it, it's because they wanted to brag to their friends and neighbors up north in the polar vortex that, look where I'm at. So anyway, I found that contractor. They've worked the entire state, I mean, everywhere. I think they may have recently put a sign in the stadium where they had the Super Bowl at. They do signs all over Atlanta. They've done trails, you name it, cities. Here are some of their signs. That's Emery Rental. And I'm just showing a few just to let you see that there's the sign I was talking about. That used to be on I-95. That's now in front of the Speedway. Here's Kissimmee, and here's the state of Florida. And what you can't see with the Kissimmee sign is they made that to match the columns, red trim on them and everything. It's really it's a pretty presentation. So they really know what they're doing. Simultaneously to all this going on, Brant Ronat and the Chamber, they were doing a branding. And if you think about the Titusville font downstairs in the lobby, you know, that was part of the branding. So at that point, it was handed over to Titusville's Trails Subcommittee, and they worked with Don Bell Signs, and eventually they started to come up with what they wanted to put out here. And as you can see, there's nothing there right now. That font's really not in the sky, but this is, I don't know how well you can see that, but that's what they came up with, and what you see there is Welcome to Titusville, Gateway to Nature and Space, and donuts. That donut sign's gone now. So that would be the entryway sign. And what was decided was they wanted to kind of go historical, old school, and put the gooseneck type lighting out there instead of having the illuminated from the back. So that's what the plan was, or is. And here you see Titusville Trails. That's the complete opposite side. If you're coming over the bridge, going down Garden Street towards 95, or just going home, that's right here. And basically, now we get to now we get to what? And so actually, fully funded, both sides would be $198,000. If somebody was to choose to fund that, and they were just going to do the one side, which I would highly suggest that would be the side going out towards the refuge, the Playland, et cetera. And that's the Gateway to Nature and Space side. That's half of that amount, $99,000. One of the things that our economic development director has done is she did talk to Renaissance Titusville, no more than just would you consider, and that would be some type of public-private partnership. So I say we did one side, maybe they did the other side. I don't know that they could do that, but that was just can we, just like we did with the splash pad. So. There you have it. That's the complete presentation, so it would just be a matter of what your guidance is going forward.
Thank you, Jim. First, I'll ask if there are any questions. Oh, yes, sir.
Yes,
Go
sir.
right ahead.
So, Jim, do we have a price for the sign without the lights?
Yeah, we have a price for it without the lights, and I have I didn't do that part of the program. Yeah. I don't imagine it would be like astronomically expensive. We do have a lighting company in town, but yeah. I have no idea at this point, but we could get back with you on that.
I'd like to know how much it's going to be without the lights.
Without the lights?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, without the lights, that's the pricing is $199 for one.
Yeah, without the lights.
That's without the lights.
Ooh.
Yeah. This is without the lights?
That's without the lights. Oh, it is? And having, yeah, exactly.
I didn't understand that.
So we get some spray paint.
$1.98 for a can.
And what lights are they proposing, if I may?
I'm sorry, Mr. Johnson?
What, you mentioned two types of lights, back and back.
Well, there is a such thing as back illumination, but that was pushed off the table.
They're just talking about
They're talking about
gooseneck?
like gooseneck lighting or other lighting that would give it more of a historical feel.
We do have a lighting company in town, you know.
Well, that's what I, yeah, yes.
I'm blown away by the fact that that's without the lights. I also don't quite understand the pricing, because it appears both sides cost the same amount, although this side is much more intricate than the other. So that doesn't make a lot of sense to me either.
Yeah, and I don't know why it's like that, because I did ask the question, what if you took off welcome to, or you wanted something else? And they talked about, that was today, and they talked about square footage, and it would reduce the square footage, and if you put something in, I'm talking about the Gateway to Nature and Space side, so.
Whose light is up? Member Stokel, I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you for this, because I was actually really excited about this, getting this. Is this just white lettering?
That's what it is, yes.
Okay, so would you say it's similar to the Daytona sign, the Kissimmee sign, or what would be a comparable? Do you know?
I wouldn't, it looks
Okay.
like in the picture that the Daytona sign is lit up at night.
The Daytona sign is my favorite on this, when we're looking at these. Yeah, so I just don't know. And then my other question, do we have any other bids? Or is this like
No, this was just strictly,
one
they
potentially?
would do an engineering design and give us a
Okay.
price as to what they would charge for something like this.
Mhm.
And I think it was done several months ago.
So we just kind of came up with this idea and said, what would you charge? They didn't really submit something of what they would do for X amount of dollars.
No, this was given.
What
This
happened
came
is,
from them?
council deliberated, not your council, but it took several, probably 4 or 5 months to come up with that
I think
look.
we did didn't we do this?
It might have been your council.
I think we did. I
Yeah.
remember discussing this.
But
I think they started it, and I think we came.
Kind of
Yeah,
came.
yeah, I think that's right. You're
Okay,
right.
I remember
Yep.
seeing this, but yeah, so somebody else gave this back to us, or we?
Well, Don Bell signs, this.
Okay.
That design was,
I remember we came up with these phrases. I want to say we said yes. I remember that, and so this is what one vendor came back and said.
Right.
What they could do for this price.
and the fact that they've
Yeah.
designed and
Okay.
engineered it, you could go to any vendor if you desired.
True. Okay.
I do know that this particular vendor has just all over the state with their signs.
Okay.
Lots of
so they're
cities.
good.
And I'm not saying
Okay,
that,
gotcha. I see what you're saying.
and you might be able to get some spray paint and get it for half the
Yeah,
price.
no, I mean, yeah, that price is just a little high. I would like to see potentially a couple other bids, and I don't know. It's good. I like the verbiage just to see what it would look like potentially, and that price is just kind of too high for me. But if we are going to do it, I would like to do one side at a time if it is going to be expensive, and I would want it to be nice. Just because I think that as we continue moving forward, this trail will hopefully be used a lot. So I really want to show off our town. So I wouldn't want it to be a half job. So,
But I think if you look at your Daytona sign, it is lit.
yeah, I like the Daytona sign. That was my
and
favorite.
I think we could ask Public Works what they could come up with to light that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So.
Anything else?
Nope. Those are.
Member Jordan.
Thank you, sir. I do like the signage. It's a little boring when you look at it. It's just white. It needs some color on it for sure. But certainly, we can't just go with this price for sure. I would suggest that we put it out for bid and see what we come up with from someone else. Even a local guy, LED signs are pretty expensive. I know. I'm trying to remember what we paid for the LED sign that we have at the Chamber of Commerce. That was pretty expensive. This is my first time actually seeing this thing. It's just lettering,
Well, it's over state road, so there's only certain things that you can put on the bridge that goes over a state road, and there's only certain lighting that you can do as well.
Yeah, okay, I appreciate that, but I think we need to go out for bids and see. We would get our heads put on a platter if we go and spend this kind of money.
And deserve
it. Yeah, and deserve it if we do something like this, at that kind of money for sure. I like the partnership though. You know, if we can get a group that wants, you're looking at me, a group that wants to, you know, explore this as a fundraiser for the city. I think Mr. Mayor doesn't think that's a good idea.
No, I
What?
think GTR, I am liaison to that,
Yeah.
and money is one of their.
No, I wasn't thinking GTR, I was just
Well,
saying
that's who was mentioned as.
Right,
as
yeah.
doing it, So that's why I'm.
Yeah, okay, yeah. But anyway.
Okay. Vice Mayor, sir.
Some of what I was going to say has already been said, and I agree. I think that, you know, you're going to do this thing, you got to light it up. And if you're going to stay with the white, maybe you can come up with some different colored lights that hit it. You know, a green and a yellow, and, you know, kind of put some different colored lights on it. I agree. If it's just going to be white, we don't want to just light it with white. Is there any, and I also agree we need to get more bids because none of us are going to be excited about $200,000. Can you downsize it at all? You know, and I don't want to downsize it too much, but would downsizing it do much to the price at all? You know,
From what I understand, I wasn't involved in this part of the process, but when I talked to them today, what I understand, if you reduce the square footage, you reduce the price.
Yeah, and again, to Member Stokel's point, we want to make it look really nice, so I think you almost got to be careful with the carving that I'm talking about now. So before we get into, you know, cutting the size and cutting the words and all that, maybe we can rebid it out a little bit. And then if we still don't like the bids, then maybe we do have to cut some, you know, welcome to out in this Titusville Gateway and maybe we do have to downsize it a little bit. But I think otherwise, we all are excited. I mean, that was one of the first things we got to look at.
I totally agree with about everything because everybody seems to be saying the same thing. We like getting that up there. It's too expensive the way it's presented at this point. I'm not sure if we only had one bid or did we go out for?
Well, they haven't got to that point technically, because when you go to bid something out, you usually have money
Okay, well, I heard the city manager
appropriated towards that.
mentioning, talking to our staff as to what they could do, and that's not a bad idea.
Are you talking about lighting or signage?
The signage, the signage itself. Now, lighting, I think we might be able to get cooperation from Barn Light Electric, and they do that type of sign. I mean, that type of light. So, and they're, you know, they're very civic-minded. So I would suggest you go to them and explain our situation, not for them to devise the sign, but if we were to put something like up, well, could they do some sort of lighting and, you know, maybe they could make a project, a cooperative
And as
product.
far as color, I haven't spoke to them about that. I
No,
can't imagine.
I'm talking about two different subjects. The letters are one thing, that has nothing to do with them. The lighting would be their contribution, or maybe they just could give us a reasonable price on it.
Yes, sir, just to clarify, for Public Works, what I was saying is for Public Works to work on lighting it, this is well beyond our capability to create a sign.
Oh, is it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right.
Yep.
Well, then we'd have to look at the sign independently as well. But putting them separately may be an advantage to us because we have the lighting company here. I don't know whether they can do it. Now, would they be allowed to put lighting up, or would they provide us with the lighting and then?
Sir, they did donate lighting for the splash park.
Mm-hmm, right.
We would have to get approval from the state as to how and what lights are being used because it is over a state road.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, $198,000 says I think we should try and put some more effort into that, and I think everybody is feeling that way.
So what I heard is we're going to rebid it or at least put a formal bid out to see what kind of price we come back, and then we'll come back to council with the current design and let you know what we come up with.
Okay, and then we can go from there as far as getting like local cooperation for lighting or other things. Okay, everybody agree with that consensus?
Yes, I had one other thing.
Yes, sir.
And that was, I kind of like the idea. I'm not sure, do we have any kind of process to partner with a business what I was visualizing is to go to Barn Light and say we'd like for you to help us purchase this sign and actually allow them to put on here, home of Barn Light lighting. I mean, can you do that? Can you have that type of partnership where they actually might even buy the lights and put in there even lit saying home of Barn Light?
That's the question.
Can you
for
do
the
that, sir?
City attorney?
We could look at it. There are some issues, particularly if in 5 years they're not here anymore. and you have a business. We could look at public-private partnerships.
Yeah.
You are going to have issues when you go select one business to put on a public sign.
I kind of like
I
this.
think there are a lot of issues with that, but there could be ways we could look at doing partnerships.
Kind of like to start out seeing if we could just get a cooperative effort or something like that, and that would be another step if we want to take it. But I'd like to start low down on the price.
No problem.
Right. Well, I think you have your orders. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, that's 6 minutes.
Okay.
What's next?
Next item. No. All bridges. Yes, certainly.
I'd like to bring something up under new business.
You want to do it under council reports?
Well, I sort of like to keep Peggy here and.
Can you
I
hold
don't
on
know
one
if
second?
Peggy-
Just let's go down
Okay.
the list. We have no new business. There's no petitions from the public, so now you're on.
Okay. When we did the community meeting, one of the things that a couple of the individuals talked about was, could we do some landscaping in our South Street Target area? And I did talk to Mr. Luis and Ms. Peggy over there about it. Apparently, there are some areas that we could do some landscaping in. One's a park, one is over by the grocery store. And I understand that we may have some funds that would be, potentially could be used from that. So I would love to see that happen.
Is there irrigation there, or do we have
We'd have to do Florida native plants.
Florida native plants? Is that what
Yeah.
you're saying? No irrigation necessarily.
I don't know, the one spot may have some irrigation because right now it's a park. So, but at least if we could explore that and maybe ask Ms. Bisaka to come back to us with an idea.
Council, everybody agree with that? Yep. I see everybody nodding heads. Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Anything for you.
It's getting late.
It is. That's what happens when it goes late, by the way.
That's why my head's nodding.
Mayor's report, you have my report. City manager's report.
Any other council members?
Oh, any other council members? I'm sorry. I always do that. I hear none. Oh, I hear one.
Actually, I got 4 items. They're very quick, okay?
Promise?
Yeah, I promise it is. Well, first of all, I certainly want to congratulate Sarah Stoker for the 4 under 40.
Absolutely.
She made us proud for sure, so I was happy to be there for sure. So keep doing what you're doing. I also was honored to be at the astronaut memorial service that they had last week at Kennedy Space Center. And what shocked me, well, first of all, I hadn't been out there in a long time and didn't realize that there's a new entrance to it and you have to pay to park there now. But what really startled me was the thousands of people who were coming in as I was leaving that memorial. And I thought to myself, why aren't these people going there and then turning right on US 1 and coming to Titusville? And lo and behold, I came up with an idea, and I don't even know if we can do it, but we have no signage that tell people that we're here in Titusville. There is nothing on 405 at all, no sign at all that says, welcome to Titusville, turn right, and these are the amenities that you have. So they tend to stay on 405 from the Welcome Center back to 95 and leave the city. And I think we should be able to do something, some type of advertising to welcome them into Titusville and let them know what's there. Right?
Question. Can I ask
Well,
a-
that's the, you know,
That's what I was gonna say. With 95, I know we have it there. Are you talking about like if they go back on like 528?
What I'm talking about is when you are leaving the Space Center
Mhm.
and you're connecting to US 1, there is nothing.
So in that area,
Yeah,
okay, I know what
just
you're talking
have them
about.
turn right to come into
So there's not a
Titusville.
sign that
There's
says
no
Titusville?
signage. There is nothing.
There's a sign there. It says Titusville.
Not a sign, not
He
a
wants-
green
he
sign
wants-
that
he
says
wants-
Titusville. I'm talking about a sign that says this is amenities that we have if you turn right. It, what's so funny? I don't know why you couldn't have a big sign there that says, here are the amenities you have.
You have to, you'd be putting up a billboard.
Right.
On somebody else's property. The state does certain signs and that's it. They don't go in for advertising. I hear what you're saying, but there are, you gotta understand there are limitations that you can't just say, let's put up a big sign and if you try to go through the state for a sign, it'll take you about 6 years to get a sign.
Okay, well, maybe we should start, because, you know, for us to just have,
It's a start.
there are thousands of people that are just leaving the city, and we're talking, we say we're, what, the 19th busiest place for people to visit? Well, that ain't, you know, they're not coming to Titusville for sure. They're actually, it's almost like the closest thing we have to getting visitors here is when we have a launch. And then we get some of that. But when you're talking about thousands of people that are right there at the Welcome Center, to me, I'm not going to belittle. I'm just letting you know, I think we need to do something. We need to look at that for sure.
I do want to add something which you may not have been exposed to, but the TDC, and I'm not sure they're all out there at this point, but for years we had signs coming down 95, coming up 95, and coming over
I remember that, yeah.
Orlando, which was hitting all the roads that people came into, and it was specific billboard signs to Titusville. And that, it wasn't a bad thing, and what you're saying is not a bad thing.
Sir, could you sit towards your microphone? Jim's having a hard time picking
Oh,
it up.
sorry. All right.
Okay.
As I said, I think you have something there, but we have to figure out how to do it, because it's not quite as easy as saying, but let's put up a big sign.
No, I know it's not going to be easy, but, you know, we're not up here because things are easy for sure, so. And the last thing is, we just gave a proclamation to a gentleman, which was really nice, but I'd like permission for me to work with staff for a proclamation for my pastor, who has just given up his senior pastorship to his son, and he's been working in the city for 35 years, you know, saving souls and all of that. So if that's okay, we can bring it back to the council at a later
Sure.
date. Is that okay? Appreciate it.
I would only, not, your thing is fine, but sometimes you start
I understand.
something and then everybody wants one.
Right.
And to
right.
make those presentations in council. Now, we do often do them. This one was a particularly worthy one, I would say. But we do proclamations, and they don't necessarily get it done here during council meetings, but we do give them the proclamations just like the one you saw. So that's probably a better way, otherwise we'd be flooded.
I understand that, but I think this one is worthy of the public seeing this one for sure. So if it's okay, I would like to do that for sure. And that's my last thing. That was 4 things, believe it or not, so.
I believe it.
All right, thank you.
Vice Mayor.
Kind of to go along with what Member Jordan said, obviously I think that we do a good job in a lot of places of pointing out where we're at, and there's some we don't. Recently, I actually said at a council meeting, because I'd heard it that day, that Kennedy Space Center has surpassed Disney as the number one visitors destination, and so when you're talking about the thousands of people, it's really taken off over there.
Right.
But a good news thing is I went to Pier 22 last Friday with my wife, I believe it was, and we're eating and we're talking to some people near us, and they had come to us from Port St. John. That may not sound like a big deal, but I used to live in Port St. John, and when you come out on US 1, you always turn right, and you go to Merritt Island. But I told my wife, it hit me, I said, you know what's really cool about that? I said, they turned left. And they came out of Fay Boulevard, and they turned left, and they came to eat at, in Titusville. And I would like to see more of that, but that was pretty exciting, and it's happening. We're getting some really good restaurants, and we're getting some real big draws, and they couldn't, that was the first time I had been there. I tried 2 other times, and I couldn't find a parking spot. But, they were raving about it, and not only the food, but the atmosphere was tremendous. So that was kind of neat to see that somebody had turned left and came to Titusville from Port St. John instead of going to the south.
That's a very good point, and I think you're right. As we're growing, we are getting more and more diverse restaurants, and we certainly have many good restaurants for years, very well-known restaurants, but I do see some of the ones that are coming in that I've recently gone to that some of them just opened, some of them have been open for a while, but it's really improving. So that's growth. That's what growth does for you. Our problem is we didn't have it, so the pie, every time the pie got split, the pieces got smaller, and one place would open and another would close. You need to have that growth, and people don't always realize that. But very good point. Anything else anybody would like to discuss at this point? If not, City Manager, anything you have?
Yes, sir. I've got 11 resolutions I'd like to read right now. All kidding aside, I do have two agreements that are hard copy in front of council. One of them is time sensitive, and one of them we just want to get done with. And the first is an agreement to terminate the grant agreement between Project-Based Learning, aka Space Coast Fab Lab, and the City of Titusville, and the conveyance of their capital equipment to us. So you have the document, and what my recommendation is for you to review the document and authorize the mayor to sign that document.
Do I have a motion?
So move.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Not hearing any. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed, like sign? Passes unanimously. You got it, sir.
Second is a resolution of the City of Titusville supporting a grant application by Space Florida to obtain a U.S. Department of Transportation infra funds to replace the 1964 Indian River Bridge and to expand Space Commerce Way and provide for an effective date. This, you read the recitals on this. This is a time sensitive in support of a very needed project to continue to support space on both sides of the river. So if I could have council authorize the mayor to sign this, and we'll get this over to Space Florida as soon as we can. It's a huge undertaking, and it's a short fuse requirement.
I'd make that motion.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed, like sign? Passes unanimously.
We need a roll call.
It's resolution.
Roll call, please.
Member Nelson?
Yes.
Mayor Johnson?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Diesel?
Yes.
Member Stokel? Yes. Member Jordan?
Yes.
Passes unanimously.
And last is this, that completes my report, unless you have any questions. I do list 3 information items for your consideration, and believe the next is the city attorney's marijuana.
At your last council meeting, council asked me to provide a memorandum discussing the statute on medical marijuana and the number of dispensing facilities staff has provided you, which is attached to my report. Current dispensing facilities that are located throughout the state. With regard to the statute, and it's in your memorandum, but I'll point out that pursuant to Florida Statute 381.986, when it comes to medical marijuana dispensing facilities within the city, the council had two options. One is to ban those facilities. The other is, if you do not ban them, you treat them similar to your pharmacies. You cannot have location regulations that are more strict than your pharmacies. And this council enacted an ordinance to do that, and we now treat them as pharmacies. And as you're aware, we do have one dispensary located within the city. The other thing that the statute does under preemption, and preemption says, city, you cannot regulate, these are the rules, is you cannot, by ordinance, restrict the number of dispensaries. Once you've decided to allow them, you cannot have an ordinance that limits the number. So a question was raised, well, can we ban them? Well, under statute, as I said, you can ban them, or you can treat them as pharmacies. You've chosen to treat them as pharmacies. To institute a ban now, you would have to treat the existing one as legal. In a sense, you've limited the number, arguably. But I want to let you know, the intent of the statute was treat them as pharmacies, do not have an ordinance to limit the number or ban them. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have regarding that.
Any questions? I'm kind of torn on it. I would like to see actually no more than what we have, because it's not just one. They can put dispensaries all over the place. How many are they allowed? Do you know that number?
Okay, per the statute, well, let me just tell you right now, per the Office of Medical Marijuana Use, there's 88 dispensing locations as of January 4th. Based on
They have one main operation that's supposed to be medical, and then they have dispensaries, allow so many dispensaries.
Each medical marijuana treatment center can open 25 dispensing facilities.
So, and what's the limitation on that? Space-wise, I mean, where can they put them? How, in one town, or?
You have, they're broken up by region. There's 4 regions. We happen to be in the central region. As I said, they may not establish or operate more than a statewide maximum of 25 dispensing facilities, unless the medical marijuana use registry reaches a total of 100,000 active registered qualified patients. When it reaches 100,000, and then upon each further instance of the total active registered qualified patients increasing by 100,000 statewide, the maximum number of dispensing facilities that each treatment center may establish and operate increases by 5.
And the organization of the business that we have here has 20 locations throughout the state at this point. Anyway, the point is that it seems to me, from that perspective, one is overdoing it. On the other hand, when you look at creating monopoly, that's a problem also, because if they're the only ones here, then there is no limitation on what they're going to do as far as price and so forth. And for the legitimate part of I probably shouldn't say that, but there may be people who use it for necessary things and people that use it for different reasons. So, you know, that's where I'm at, and it's not an answer by any means. I don't know what to say at that point, because I think we need competition, but I also don't want to get overrun. But the ordinance, state doesn't leave us a lot of choices, so I don't know. I see Member Jordan.
I just want to say, I remember when we started having this conversation, and I wasn't here when we did the ordinance, but my suggestion is that we just leave things like they are.
Well,
because as you say, Mr. Mayor, if we decide to ban it, then the one that's here is legal and there is a monopoly. And as a business person, that would irritate me. So I would suggest that we just leave it as it is, because anything else I think would cause probably lawsuits also. And we don't need that for sure, so.
Member Nelson?
I agree with Member Jordan, maybe not for the same reasons, but not for, well, okay.
I don't know what that means.
Same reasons, but I'm thinking of it more in terms of lawsuits. And seriously, we're creating you've got an ordinance, we're not violating the ordinance, but we are violating the rules. And so to me, that sort of puts us in a legal position that I really don't want to be in. So
Good point.
for that, I do not want to turn around and create problems which maybe don't exist. And the problems that we have, really, I look at Tallahassee and think they started this problem without really giving us the ability to turn around and say, these are the places we want to have these facilities. So I'm sort of like, it's up to them to fix it. That's horrible to say, but it's like, you guys potentially created a problem. You didn't think it through, and, you know.
Maybe they did.
Maybe they did, yeah. So that's my thought.
Are you through? I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
Member Stowe.
So I know I'll already be outvoted, so that's fine for our discussion. But I do want to thank the city attorney for providing this information. What I was really looking at, and you guys both alluded to it, lawsuits. I wanted to see if there were any cities potentially at this point that have, agreed to or voted to ban it and then overturned it to permit it. And I don't think anything came back like that. The closest one was one that had a moratorium and then it expired before they decided to ban it. So there was one that kind of got in that way. So I do think there could be potential for lawsuits. I will say, though, moving forward, as we kind of monitor what is happening at the state level, that I would like or hope that we could be, as a council, very proactive to see what is coming forth, just to make the best decision for our citizens. So, thank you.
Anything
That's it. That's it.
Isn't there Osceola County?
What she's referencing is, I'm not aware of an example where you had a city adopt an ordinance to treat them as a permitted use as pharmacies are, and then turn around later and then adopt an ordinance banning them. What they did in the Osceola County case was they had a moratorium, and they let the moratorium lapse. During that lapsed period of time, permits came in, and since there wasn't a ban or a moratorium, they had to treat them as pharmacies, so they did. They later passed a ban. And so the three that came in between the gap, which I believe was just a few days, of the moratorium ending and the ban taking effect, they have 3 dispensaries, which are probably now lawful non-conforming, and all others are banned.
So there could be legal action.
There hasn't been. I guess someone could argue that the intent of the law, but currently there is no litigation over those.
Yeah, but it could be challenged.
Could be absolutely.
Sure. And that's your point. Vice Mayor.
I think clearly we all are saying we'd like to have more home rule, and we'd like to stop having the state tell us what we can do with this, but that's where it was when we moved on this. I do realize there are certain issues that keep coming back up, and I keep saying in this one, and believe me, remember we put this on a 3-time moratorium ourselves, and we put it on hold, and we put it on hold, and we were waiting on the state and waiting on the state, and we were watching other counties. And, Orange County and some of the others moved on it. And what I kept saying then, and I'll say now, I feel solid where I was then and where I am now. I had thought 75% of the state of Florida passed it. I was just convinced that was overloaded with Miami and Jacksonville and those sort of people. And then I got the facts and stats and found out that our own little city of Titusville was 75% in favor of it as well. And when that happened, I kept saying, and I felt that way, I've got a plate here that says, you've got 3 out of the 4 people out there voted for it in this town, your neighbors. So I'm saying that I would like more control of it. I hope that happens. I would like some way, I don't know about you guys, but I've talked to my state legislature about that, my state legislator about that, and I will continue to do so. It's a little frustrating that they get washed out when it comes to giving any kind of home rule on anything. Would love to have more control of that. At this time, I would certainly go with Member Jordan, and let's leave it alone.
I want to make one point as to the 75%. You got to remember what bill of goods they were sold.
remember that.
It was for the kids. It was for the kids. It's for the kids. It's for the kids. That's what sold it, but it wasn't for the kids. It was for somebody over in Orlando that was behind it.
I get what you're saying.
So, all right. That being said, I've got that off my chest. Anybody else have anything they would like to speak about at this point? Or can speak about at this point? I declare this meeting adjourned. Don't